241. To destroy him, make him crazy. First Lord Voldemort pressed down on Cyrus's shoulder. He was tall, almost a head taller than Harry, and though thin, he looked far healthier than the scrawny boy in his grip. His sudden appearance left Ron and the Weasley twins stunned. Their minds went blank. Fear, which should have been immediate and consuming, seemed to evaporate. Ron, still reeling from the force of an earlier spell, turned his head, lost his footing, and rolled aside. But even in his daze, he didn't forget Harry. He fired a spell bullet straight at Voldemort's cheek. It did nothing. The projectile, an alchemical construct rather than true wizarding magic, couldn't harm a wizard like Voldemort. With a thought, the Dark Lord turned the missile into a flower that blossomed and then wilted into petals mid-flight, leaving only a faint scent against his skin. "Let go of Harry," Ron shouted. "Touching, isn't it, Harry?" Voldemort said, every syllable laced with contempt. A lazy gesture of his hand trapped Ron and the twins in an invisible force, sending their bodies slamming against the far courtyard wall. In truth, it was nothing more lethal than a permanent sticking charm, gluing the three of them in place. The spell had no offensive power, but it was notoriously difficult to break. Sirius had the most experience with such enchantments. If he had any say, he would gladly remove that irritating portrait of his mother at Grimmauld Place. "Let go of me, Lord Voldemort." Cyrus pretended to struggle, straining against the Dark Lord's hold. He didn't dare use true force. No living thing could match what Voldemort was capable of, but the difference in strength was unmistakable. Voldemort was far stronger than before. Cyrus suspected the Dark Lord had been experimenting with magic on himself. Inside the house, the Order of the Phoenix had also noticed Voldemort's arrival. "Harry," Sirius howled. The Order tried desperately to break through, but Death Eaters blocked the exits. Moody slammed his wand, integrated into his walking stick, into the ground. The shockwave pushed back several Death Eaters like ripples across a pond. Barty Crouch Jr. prepared to counterattack when a black shape lunged at him. Lupin, transformed, feral, and berserk, had broken free. He hadn't taken his potion that day, or something had gone wrong with it. Whatever the cause, he was a savage beast, blind with fury. Snape dodged sharp claws by casting the flying charm the Dark Lord had taught him, but the werewolf bit and tore indiscriminately, unstoppable in his transformed skin. He was not physically huge, quite the opposite, but his resistance to magic in that form turned him into a wrecking force. Lupin howled in the moonlit night. Each leap sent Death Eaters crashing and left shattered bodies in his wake. Though his attacks had no discernment, the sheer ferocity of his rampage carved a path toward the greatest threat in the yard. Moody barked hoarsely, "Follow him." The Order threw themselves along the lane Lupin had opened. The werewolf, despite his madness, could still recognize enemies. He charged at Lord Voldemort. With a sound like a thunderclap, Lupin hit an invisible wall and slammed to the ground. Voldemort had simply turned his palm. As if a mountain had pressed him, Lupin's momentum collapsed, and the earth itself dented a few centimeters beneath the strain. "How dare a lowly beast stand before me?" Voldemort hissed, looking down at the prostrate Lupin as if he were no more than a crawling insect. He then shifted his gaze to Sirius and the others who had forced their way through and to the Death Eaters closing in. He flicked a finger, signaling them to halt, though the Order was far from safe. "You know who! Release Harry!" Sirius roared. He feared death less than he feared what Voldemort might do to Harry. Voldemort scarcely spared him a glance. "Did you think my remark a moment ago was only for that filthy werewolf mongrel?" His voice was ice and fire. "Kneel." A crushing force pressed down on Moody and the rest, as if invisible hands tried to fold their spines in two. Voldemort loved to make his enemies bow. His unparalleled magic could bend even the strongest to his will. Those elite wizards, forced low by force of thought alone, were left squashed and humiliated. Cyrus still pretended to struggle. Voldemort held him with one hand, but it felt like a weld of steel. Cyrus realized now that Voldemort had experimented on himself. This new physical power explained the gap that had always separated them. The Dark Lord's immortality had given him freedom to push his magic further, and the result was frightening. Voldemort was not oblivious to the fact that Dumbledore would not sit idle. He had expected confrontation. "Come out, Dumbledore," he sneered. Privet Drive lay quiet under a layer of unnatural noise. The street seemed to have become a battlefield, every sound a threat. The neighbors had long since fled. Dumbledore had prepared for this. Voldemort saw it all unfold and waited. A spark flared in the dark, then burst into a spray of iron-bright flame. From it, Dumbledore emerged, his white robes trailing embers as if he had stepped out of the hearth itself. "Release Harry, Lord Voldemort," Dumbledore said calmly. He addressed the Dark Lord as he always did, with the gravity owed to an old pupil turned enemy. Voldemort's eyes flicked to the presence of one man, not the trap he had expected. "Where is Cyrus?" he demanded. "Cyrus is in your hand," Voldemort thought. He suspected trickery. "Perhaps you misunderstand," Dumbledore replied. "Cyrus and I are not in collusion." Voldemort suspected otherwise. Why else would Grindelwald have agreed to cooperate with Dumbledore? But he held back, pressing the point. Whether or not Cyrus had been bait, he would remain on his guard. "All right, release Harry." Dumbledore raised the Elder Wand. At the sight of the wand, realization hit Voldemort. He didn't need to take Harry to prove himself. He only had to defeat him. He had already captured Harry. Did that not make it his victory? A thrill surged through him, raw and intoxicating. He kept his grip on the boy with one hand, and with the other, seized the Elder Wand. A flood of power poured through him from the wand. It thundered into him like a torrent through every pore, every vessel. Voldemort uttered a low, almost orgasmic moan as the wand's force washed over him. He could feel, could almost know, whether he was the wand's true master. The sensation swelled inside him like triumph itself. "I thought you might be smarter, Dumbledore," he said. "I thought Harry Potter might not be the master of the Elder Wand, that you were using him as a mere decoy, but you actually let him become bait to lure me." It echoed back to the school years. Dumbledore had used the Philosopher's Stone as bait once before, putting Voldemort and Harry into direct conflict. Then, fate had favored the schoolboy. Now Voldemort had captured his prize. He gloated, savoring the moment. "You don't learn, Dumbledore," Voldemort taunted, name-calling every sentence as if to underline his triumph. He unleashed a spell that struck the night like thicker-than-lightning force. Dumbledore met it, bending beneath the force as if he were an old tree about to snap. "How pathetic, isn't it?" Voldemort crowed, the exhilaration bubbling despite himself. After so many years, the taste of dominance was almost intoxicating. He laughed, cruel and bright. "You are so weak, Dumbledore." "Is that how you truly feel, my old professor?" he added, mock-honeyed. "How is your body, old man?" His mock concern dripped poison. Dumbledore, breathing heavily, remained resolute. Even now he taught. "Never be too proud, Lord Voldemort," Dumbledore warned. Voldemort's voice dropped to something like a growl as he spoke of the Elder Wand. "The unparalleled Elder Wand belongs to me now. Do you think anyone can take it from me?" His certainty was absolute. Absolutely impossible. "I want to kill you now," he said, savoring the thought. "But that would be too easy. I will kill you in front of everyone. Don't worry, not today, and not in tomorrow's match." He sneered at Dumbledore's old alliances. "Thank your lover Grindelwald that I spared you once." Then, with dangerous curiosity, he asked, "What makes you think Harry can defeat me? That absurd, ridiculous prophecy." Dumbledore's answer was simple and quiet. "Because Harry possesses something you will never have. Your magic is powerful, but your heart is barren. You are the truly pathetic one, Lord Voldemort. Living through the Resurrection Stone, sustained by this half-dead body, what can you feel?" "Nothing," Voldemort said, dismissive. "It is as it always has been," Dumbledore replied. He spoke of love as an ancient kind of magic, something Voldemort had once believed he could master and then break. Voldemort believed he had done so. He had broken Lily Potter's protection. He could come to Privet Drive and touch Harry. He felt omnipotent and bored with the conversation. He had waited long enough for Cyrus to appear. No one was coming. He felt the Elder Wand's power crowned him. He no longer needed the boy. "Enough for today," Voldemort said, finally releasing Cyrus. He floated up, looking down at the scene like a god. With the Elder Wand's allegiance, or so he believed, he could prove his indifference to Harry. He could take the last soul fragment if he wished, but he specifically did not want to. He wanted to humiliate Dumbledore, to show the world that the so-called savior was a joke. He would leave the Horcruxes intact for now. They were his failing safety net. Go back and tell Cyrus, he said, voice cold as a blade. Tomorrow will be his death day. 242. The third project starts Quidditch pitch. Even though it was summer vacation, no student wanted to miss this match. It had drawn the four most powerful wizards of the century and promised to decide the fate of the entire wizarding world. In fact, it wasn't just students. The Quidditch World Cup stadium, built last summer, had been pressed back into service. The 100,000-seat venue was packed with witches and wizards from all over the world, and countless more followed the event by newspaper and other means. On the lawn in the center of the pitch, Lord Voldemort stood upright like a spear. He was the first to arrive. After last night's attack, he could barely wait to return and see the contest begin. For him, this was more than a game. It was the chance to dominate the magical world. Defeat Dumbledore. Kill Cyrus. He wanted to remove every hidden threat. Time was drawing near. Voldemort looked up toward the Forbidden Forest. The sun had already risen, and bright light spread through the morning mist like a golden robe. The day that could mark death and the Dark Lord's reassertion of power was, ironically, pleasantly sunny. It almost dazzled him, and the thousands of faces in the stands blurred together. He wondered if Harry Potter might be among them, or whether last night's terror had frightened him away. In fact, Harry was not in the stands. Hermione and Ginny had taken their seats together and saw Ron sitting alone nearby. "Where's Harry?" Hermione asked. Ginny had told her about the attack, and Ron wasn't sure whether the transfer last night had worked. Harry hadn't been taken by Voldemort, but Dumbledore's expression had been grave. Ron quietly told Hermione what had happened, and Ginny listened, taut with attention. "I suppose you know who must have gotten what he wanted," Hermione said, glancing toward the pitch at the man who so resembled Cyrus. Voldemort, in the sunlight, even looked almost sacred. "He keeps saying he doesn't care about the prophecy or about Harry," she continued. "But he attacked Harry. That must mean he wants something else." "What if he wanted to retrieve his soul?" Ginny asked. They had learned about Horcruxes in the Department of Mysteries. "If that were it, he wouldn't have given up so easily on Harry last night," Hermione answered. "He's staying at Sirius's," Ron said. "Dumbledore told him it was best to stay hidden." None of them knew that the Harry they thought they understood, the one who was actually Cyrus in disguise, was currently in the headmaster's office with the real Harry. Wearing Cyrus's face at the moment, Harry looked at Dumbledore and Cyrus with a mixture of resentment and helplessness. "You two could have stopped him last night, couldn't you?" he said. "If the two of you were together, you could have defeated him." Harry had wanted Cyrus to stop Voldemort with Dumbledore. The injuries from the previous night were severe. Ron and the twins were hurt, and Lupin was the worst off. Almost every bone in his body had been crushed by Voldemort's spell. In a non-magical world, Lupin would have died long ago. "We can defeat him, but we can't kill him," Cyrus said calmly. The transfiguration that let Harry take Cyrus's face was flawless, but their personalities differed. Harry was quicker to anger. His expressions looked odd on Cyrus's features. When the conversation turned to killing, Harry fell silent. Neither Dumbledore nor Cyrus could bring themselves to kill Voldemort. The only person who could do it was Harry himself. Because Voldemort's soul resided in Harry's scar, Harry was, in effect, a Horcrux. Killing Voldemort would mean Harry's own death. By now, Harry felt not fear, but a strange calm. He had prepared himself. To him, death had been reframed as something not to be feared. James had called it a dream, and Dumbledore called death another adventure, words that offered him comfort. But comfort did not mean willingness. Harry still had attachments: Ron and Hermione and Ginny, his recently reunited godfather Sirius Black, Cyrus, Quidditch, and everything at Hogwarts. "Does it have to be me?" he said, voice edged with sorrow. "You all know I'm not special. I don't have the power to fight Voldemort. I'm only targeted because of that old prophecy. Do I have to die for that?" His agitation rose. For a moment he even shouted at Dumbledore and Cyrus. No one could blame him. Before true death arrives, many talk as if it is nothing. They cannot feel its horror. Harry, roaring like an injured beast, nevertheless did not flinch. He felt only the injustice, the sadness, and the reluctance. "This isn't about the prophecy, Harry," Cyrus said. He had withheld the full truth until now because sometimes knowledge of the future does more harm than good. You've been to the seer's office, haven't you? There are thousands of prophecy orbs, everything from the fate of nations to someone drinking a glass of water. Do you know how many of them actually come true? Harry was silent. Not half. Not even 1/10, Cyrus said. Maybe that old prophecy carried some weight, but it doesn't steer fate like a chain. What matters is the choice you make. My own choice? Harry repeated. If Voldemort had chosen not to believe the prophecy, he wouldn't have tried to make a savior for himself. He wouldn't have left you as his weakness. Cyrus's voice was steady. Like him, you can choose what you will do. Dumbledore, watching, nodded gravely. He looked at Harry with stern affection. You can choose, Harry. No one will condemn you for choosing life. You should be living without this burden. You're still a student. It is my failing, my inability to kill Voldemort, that has put this burden on you. Dumbledore's eyes filled. He was proud of Harry's bravery, but his heart broke for a child forced into such cruelty. You can give it up, Harry. Cyrus and I will find another way. I believe we can kill Voldemort. Grindelwald will help me. I can convince him. Both Cyrus and Dumbledore looked at Harry. It was an important choice, but they both already suspected what Harry would do. They knew him. As expected, Harry shook his head. He didn't want to die, but he knew what it would mean if Voldemort lived. To protect those he loved, he would step forward. Dumbledore could not guarantee another path. Yes, Dumbledore said quietly, then that is your choice. Tears shone in the old man's eyes. Not the prophecy, but the path you choose. Your destiny is in your hands. Harry seemed steadier now. I have one question, he said to Cyrus. Are you sure this plan will work? Can it really reclaim the Elder Wand's allegiance? It doesn't feel like truly defeating Voldemort. Cyrus smiled. Do you remember what Mr. Ollivander said the day you got your wand? That the wand chooses the wizard? The Elder Wand, one of the Hallows, is wiser than ordinary wands. It helps it choose a worthy master. If Voldemort were that person, I wouldn't have gained the Elder Wand's allegiance so easily last time. More than 50 years ago, the Elder Wand had belonged to Grindelwald. Even when Newt Scamander captured him, the wand did not abandon Grindelwald. Before Voldemort's first downfall, his contests with Dumbledore were fierce and often balanced. The wand did not cease to answer Dumbledore either. The Elder Wand chooses, and it will not choose Voldemort. Cyrus put a hand on Harry's shoulder. The small touch gave Harry unexpected strength. It wasn't entirely imagination. Cyrus was temporarily transferring Morgana's legacy to Harry. Not enough to make him invincible, but enough to bolster his power. Come on, Harry, Cyrus said. Don't worry, you'll win. Whoever masters the 3 Deathly Hallows is Master of Death, Harry murmured. Master of Death, invincible. He drew a breath. Cyrus couldn't resist a smile. Perhaps you won't die. Harry laughed a little, the way someone does when resignation and acceptance meet. Don't joke. If I don't die, Voldemort won't die. His soul is part of me. He tapped his forehead. Remember? Yes. But the killing curse couldn't finish you, could it? Cyrus said softly. Harry Potter, the boy who lived. Harry smiled and left the headmaster's office with Dumbledore. Cyrus ceased hiding his true appearance, transformed back, and parted from them. He headed for the observatory. The Goblet of Fire was there. Back on the Quidditch pitch, the 4 champions were already in position. Babajide, officiating the final match, had authority even Voldemort respected. Since his resurrection, Voldemort had abandoned his raving madness. His cruelty remained, but his manner no longer fit the caricature of a cold-blooded fiend. Some visiting wizards wondered whether the terrible rumors had been exaggerated. The final match is about to begin, Babajide announced. The rules are simple. The first to find the Goblet of Fire wins. He swept his gaze across the crowd and the contestants, then stepped aside, gesturing toward the castle. The Goblet of Fire is hidden somewhere in Hogwarts. I believe you've all had ample time to learn the castle's layout, he added, though we've made a few small changes. He grimaced. Altering Hogwarts' ancient magic had not been easy, and only temporary modifications were possible. Originally, the order of entry would have been determined by the earlier rounds, but due to unforeseen circumstances, you will all enter together. With that, he moved completely aside. The contest hardly needed a referee now. Everyone present would be watching. Voldemort's smile was eager. He felt the Elder Wand's power coursing through him, imagined Cyrus dying beneath it. The thought was exquisite. "Then let us begin," he said, his scarlet eyes lingering on Cyrus as Harry. "Don't worry, the match won't end quickly. I will settle things with you." Harry kept his response short and cold. "Me too." Harry walked the corridors of Hogwarts and felt like a stranger in his own home. The familiar castle had shifted into something uncanny. Every corner and passage put him on edge. Light in the halls was dim, as if some spell muted the sun. Looking out of the corridor windows, he saw only a hazy gray expanse, as if the world outside were a pensive memory rather than reality. But these walls were solid and cold, every speck of dust painfully real. The knights in the Great Hall were gone, and even the portraits lining the walls had been replaced by faces Harry did not recognize. Each painted pair of eyes followed him with an intensity that felt invasive. It was an unpleasant sensation, but Harry had little appetite for worry. He had one task, one aim, to finish. Eliminate Lord Voldemort. Nothing else mattered. The Triwizard contest had become irrelevant. The Goblet of Fire could be left in a corner of the castle. Only life and death were final. "Come, Lord Voldemort," he whispered. "Come and meet death." Lord Voldemort entered the castle from the opposite side. He had been in the Slytherin common room, staring out through the thick glass at the lake, remembering the years he had spent in Albania. He reached out and rested his fingertips on the cold pane, looking down into the black water, the lake like an abyss. The giant squid was not in sight, otherwise he might have lingered in darker memories. He left the common room like a venomous snake emerging from a damp cave. Outside the Great Hall, Grindelwald waited, a goblet of red wine in his hand. He did not seem there for a tournament, but for a feast. "Good spirits, Grindelwald," Voldemort said with a smile that never reached his eyes. "We should move quickly. As we agreed, we'll take down Cyrus together. Dumbledore is yours." "Of course," Grindelwald answered, draining the wine. He tossed the goblet aside, and it struck the stone floor, mutating into a savage hound that leapt forward. "It will lead us to Cyrus." None of those gathered cared about the contest anymore. The hound ran through the castle, and its path soon took it to Dumbledore. The headmaster stood with a plain wand in his hand, no elder wand now, and watched the two dark men approach with a face that betrayed no surprise. "What a coincidence, Albus," Voldemort said, still smiling. "Leave him to me," Grindelwald said, stepping forward to block Voldemort's way. "I'll deal with him myself." The two old rivals faced each other as if some unfinished business had drawn them back into a familiar orbit. Their history, love, betrayal, the tragedy of Ariana, hung between them like a storm cloud. Everyone watching, whether on the Quidditch pitch or via broadcast, felt the air tighten. Seeing Voldemort and Grindelwald together had drained many of the onlookers of hope. "Cyrus is still on the top floor," Hermione cried, voice tinged with alarm. Ron, however, was not watching the duel so much as scanning for other absences. Snape, who had switched sides the night before and led Death Eaters in the attack, was nowhere to be seen. Now that Voldemort himself had arrived, Snape's absence felt like a deliberate move, and Ron wondered what scheme the professor might be hiding. Back in the corridor, Grindelwald and Dumbledore exchanged words that cut sharper than any wand. "I cannot stand by and watch you die, Albus," Grindelwald said, his expression softer than it had any right to be. "Cyrus is not worthy of your trust." "Is that so? And are you?" Dumbledore shot back. Rage edged his voice despite his calm appearance. "I fought him for decades. I thought I saw a chance to destroy him, and you ruined it. You ruined everything. Your promises." His tone broke for a moment, not from weakness, but from a claustrophobic grief. "And my life." The old pain over Ariana's death surfaced in every syllable. Whether it was Aberforth, Grindelwald, or Dumbledore's own guilt that had caused the curse, none of them had paid what Dumbledore felt was due. He had read Grindelwald's letters in prison over and over, had refused to answer despite his temptation to reply, and now refused to believe those words of contrition. "I thought you had repented," Dumbledore said, more sorrow than accusation. Grindelwald only shook his head. "I don't want more regrets," he replied. Voldemort, who had been listening, moved away with a cold laugh. "No more words are needed," Dumbledore said, voice final. "Today everything ends. This war, you, me, Lord Voldemort, everything. Bombarda!" he shouted. A blasted shell of magic hurtled forward. Grindelwald met it with an equally furious spell, and the two curses locked in a thunderous stalemate. I suppose I should do as the Dark Lord suggested, break your legs and throw you in a cell, Grindelwald said, voice hard as stone. At least you'll live. Voldemort, who had been shadowing the edge of the confrontation, chuckled. Very well, I will go and find Cyrus. He climbed the stairs. Harry, who had heard the collision of spells, hurried toward the noise and came upon Voldemort in a long fifth-floor corridor. The two of them stood apart, like opposing weights on a scale, one side unbearable light, the other implacable darkness. Harry had no illusion about his chances. Panic lived just beneath his courage, but he forced himself forward, roared his defiance as loudly as he could. To himself, he was a lone lion on the plain, hair bristling, determined to make as much of a stand as he could. Voldemort watched him with the cold interest of a predator. "Did Dumbledore give you the Elder Wand?" he asked. "Are you frightened?" "Ridiculous," Harry said through a tight throat. "Why would I be?" Voldemort smirked. "Both of us have the Elder Wand now," he said. "I'll prove I'm stronger than you, not because of the wand, but because of my power." He believed it. Voldemort felt as if he had reclaimed and consolidated pieces of himself, threading stolen fragments of soul into a more complete whole. He felt invincible. Harry, however, was not without his own terrible strengths. Morgana's legacy that Cyrus had given him, the enhancement of a black dragon's magic, and the uneasy weight of being master of the three Deathly Hallows. Invincibility, Harry thought shakily. He could feel the power humming in his fingers. "Expelliarmus!" he shouted, and a crimson streamer of light burst from his wand like a blade. The force of it made his arm shake until the webbing between his thumb and forefinger tingled. Voldemort reacted instantly, snapping his own spell into the path to collide with Harry's. The duel of wands deflected Harry's discharge aside, sending it smashing into the wall with enough force to topple a section of stone. Harry allowed himself a bitter thought. The next term would have a lot of repairs. That thought evaporated as Voldemort's face tightened. "Expelliarmus?" Voldemort said, amusement turning to curiosity. "How amusing, Cyrus. I did not know mercy had become your weapon." "It will not save you," Harry replied, forcing calm as he moved forward. Voldemort jabbed his wand, and a streak of green lightning split the air, killing intent made visible. Harry ducked, feeling the cold rush of a curse near miss. He had to play Cyrus, poised, scornful, unafraid. "I pity you, Lord Voldemort," he said. "You are pathetic." "How so?" Voldemort asked, sneering. "Because you die here," Harry said. The words felt thin against the man before him, who only snorted in contempt. "You never used to tell such jokes, Cyrus," Voldemort sneered. "A frightened dog barks loudest when it tries to bluff." Hearing his assumed name, Cyrus, stung more than Voldemort's mockery. Anger flared up behind Harry's ribs. He didn't speak the name of any spell. He didn't have to. He let his arm drive his wand, let the emotion in him, fear, sorrow, the memory of losses, pour out as raw, corrosive magic. The Elder Wand drank it and amplified it. A dark wave of power surged forward like a living thing full of all the negative, grief-bound magic Harry could summon. Despair, rage, and a deep, aching hurt meant to root an enemy in place. Boom. At almost the same instant, in the long corridor behind them, Grindelwald and Dumbledore's bolts fell to the floor with thunderous impacts. The two men exchanged a look and continued their duel, neither yielding. On the Quidditch pitch, Barty Crouch watched the chaos unfold, his face a mix of colors. He realized with dawning horror that Grindelwald had never intended to ally himself truly with Voldemort. The old man had been using them. Barty thought frantically. He had to warn the Dark Lord. The castle shuddered with striking stone and flesh, with loyalties unraveling and ancient debts coming due. In that charged silence between strikes, choices were being made that would not be undone. Only death, some whispered, would be the end. "I must tell the Dark Lord this news." At that moment, Barty's mind was full of nothing else. He looked up and realized, with a rising cold in his stomach, that they had been surrounded. Professor McGonagall and the other Hogwarts teachers were there as expected, but so were the Aurors from the Ministry of Magic, quietly closing the ring. Wizards from Makusa, Durmstrang, and the International Confederation of Wizards had also come. No one had given the Death Eaters free rein this time. He only had to glance across the stands to catch Bella's provocative stare. She was waiting for them to make a move. Although the Death Eaters had seized control of the French Ministry of Magic, their military strength was nowhere near enough to match the international response now assembled. If Barty did anything rash, all of them would likely be dealt with in an instant. He couldn't act, but someone else might. Severus Snape. From the beginning, Snape had been conspicuously absent. Barty could not tell whether the Dark Lord had made some separate arrangements for him, or whether Snape, after yesterday's attack, simply dared not show his face. It wasn't surprising either way. Snape's betrayal had been bitter, and the moment he appeared, he would draw hatred and attack. Barty fretted, helpless. Meanwhile, Dumbledore and Grindelwald still traded brilliant spells, a dazzling display that looked like a fierce duel. Their movements were in perfect synchrony, but it was only a performance. The real combat between them was in words. "I think we've managed to fool him," Dumbledore said. "Perhaps." Grindelwald sounded noncommittal. More than anything, he wanted to know whether the words Dumbledore had spoken earlier had been sincere. Of course, perhaps he already knew. The gulf between them was wider than it looked. Dumbledore's warmth was a compromise for a greater purpose. "But I warn you, Albus," Grindelwald said in a voice that was pained but still edged with affection. "You know who is dangerous, yes, but Cyrus is the same. He will kill you. I saw it." "Thank you," Dumbledore replied with a smile that disguised far more than it revealed. He seemed unconcerned, but he felt otherwise. "I do not think Cyrus will kill me," he said. "He might try to defeat me. He could, and it might not be hard for him, but I don't think he would kill me. Are you sure the person you saw was him?" The current Lord Voldemort bore a face similar to Cyrus's. With an opponent as skilled as Voldemort, a transfiguration disguise could be convincing. Dumbledore suspected the figure Grindelwald had seen might have been Voldemort himself. He did not fear for his life as much as he feared that their plan had failed. Grindelwald bristled. "You think my magical eye can't see through a transfiguration?" Grindelwald's eye was legendary, an unrivaled enchantment, a sight like Odin's, able to probe past and future. Even Moody's enchanted eye could pierce an invisibility cloak. Paired with Grindelwald's power, nothing should hide from him. If Grindelwald insisted it had been Cyrus, Dumbledore felt a strange relief. "Death is not a terrible thing," Dumbledore said, almost with anticipation. To him, the world had become a cage. Love, past errors, regrets, responsibilities, they all bound him. If death could offer real rest, perhaps it would also let him apologize to Ariana properly. Grindelwald shattered the illusion. "You and I both know that's a lie," he said coldly. Ghosts in the wizarding world were not true souls, only fragments, pale shadows left because some could not let go. Dumbledore's sister had not become a ghost at all, but an obscurial, a dangerous, tormented thing whose magic fed its obscurus. Neither of them believed in a meaningful afterlife. The Deathly Hallows were not a Grim Reaper's tool, but powerful artifacts made by clever witches and wizards. If death offered anything, it was sleep. Perhaps an echo could be made to linger by strong magic, but no true continued existence. "Even if it is only sleep, that is what I need," Dumbledore said gently. He seemed to want to say more, but then he changed the subject. "All right, we should move on. Stick to the plan." He sheathed his wand and glanced at the vaulted ceiling. Through several layers of space, the sounds of spellwork echoed, distant and close at once. Harry Potter was retreating steadily. Lord Voldemort strode forward, wand aloft, his spells hissing through the air like lightning. His robes bellowed, each motion grand and inexorable. Up close, Voldemort was terrifying. Every gesture carried unstoppable force. Harry could not meet him. He dodged, parried, and tried to preserve the appearance of a fight while his body took the blows. Voldemort had no suspicion that Harry was anything other than Cyrus. With the many layers of protection and the Hallows' blessings, Harry's magic had nearly reached Cyrus's level. Morgana's legacy that Cyrus had passed on to Harry made the boy's power comparable even to Grindelwald. The three Deathly Hallows bolstered him further. Though Voldemort was stronger, his spells repeatedly lost their lethal edge as they neared Harry or simply grazed past him. The invisibility cloak's magic was no mere vanishing trick. Legends said it could elude even death. More importantly, it protected its wearer. Voldemort did not know this. He assumed a supposedly effortless evasion was Cyrus's natural skill. To him, the performance was disappointing. "Don't tell me that's all you've got, Cyrus," he roared, and attacked even as he shouted. A lethal curse shot out like a venomous snake. Harry bit down on a cry and tried to block it. Each of Voldemort's attacks felt like a blow from a sledgehammer. Sustained, they would shatter him. The spell lashed and cracked. Harry was thrown backward and slammed to the ground. For the first time, a hint of real doubt crossed Voldemort's face. "What are you doing, Cyrus?" he demanded, incredulous. "How can you be so weak?" His tone carried the insult of one who could not imagine his nemesis so easily overpowered. Voldemort reminded himself that Cyrus had been carved from pieces of him. Cyrus had humiliated him before, destroying his body and driving him to desperate measures. He had prepared for Cyrus, and yet this felt unsatisfyingly easy. The only explanation he could summon, "You've made a clone," Voldemort spat. He thought back to the Department of Mysteries, to the deception that had once betrayed him. Had Cyrus used the same trick again? "You expect that to work twice?" he said coldly. He advanced, swaggering, and leaned over Harry. "Don't make me look down on you, Cyrus. Bring out your clone, or I won't mind killing you." Harry felt utterly helpless. His power came from blessings and legacies, things he could not claim as his own achievement. Yet against Voldemort, it still seemed insufficient. The mission, however, required him to die. He had to let Voldemort kill him with his own hand. He briefly thought he should never have taken the Elder Wand or used Cyrus's magic. Perhaps then he would have died sooner. Faster, simpler. He closed his eyes and for effect offered a final taunt. "There is no clone, Lord Voldemort," he said quietly. "If you dream of killing me, then kill me now." Voldemort's suspicions spiked. A death-fearing man like him did not believe in voluntary sacrifice without trickery. "What are you playing at, Cyrus?" he demanded, stepping back and scouring the battlefield. He expected some hidden ruse, some proof of a duplicate. "Come out, Cyrus," he called, convinced a magical double lurked somewhere. From the shadows, Cyrus, who had been watching everything, sighed. Voldemort's dread of death both amazed and complicated him. If Voldemort believed a clone existed, Cyrus decided he might as well play along. "I was going to ambush you, Lord Voldemort," Cyrus said, stepping forward. He held the Elder Wand in his hand. Voldemort's face lit with triumphant certainty. "There is no third Elder Wand in this world," he said. "Just as I thought, you're a clone." Harry's own expression betrayed surprise. He knew whether the Cyrus before him was a clone, and he had no idea where that third Elder Wand had come from. But if Cyrus claimed to be a clone now, Harry could only hope the mimicry held together. Voldemort sneered. "Such tricks won't work twice, Cyrus." He positioned himself so the fight became a three-way standoff rather than a two-on-one ambush. He was never afraid of open combat. His worry was hidden schemes. Cyrus did not reply. He launched straight into action. Where Harry had relied on raw power and the Hallows shielding, Cyrus's advantage lay in his mastery, depth of knowledge, and combat skill. The instant he moved, a black snake shot from his wand, hissing as it cut through the air. The great black snake lunged, gaping to bite Voldemort. For a heartbeat, Voldemort's entire vision was swallowed by the serpent's shadow, its vertical pupils reflecting the monstrous fanged head. A red, forked tongue flicked like a taut string. The foul, fishy stench of the creature hit him. Its head was only centimeters from his throat. Still, Voldemort did not flinch. He lowered his wand a fraction, and the snake collapsed as if some vital spot had been seized, crashing to the floor. A small snake could not harm him, yet there was something oddly familiar about it. The great serpent writhed as if pinned, letting out a painful hiss. The hissing parseltongue stirred an ancient memory in Voldemort. "Nagini," he breathed. He remembered a very distant past, before Hogwarts, before the world named him Tom Riddle, when, in the orphanage, he had discovered the gift of speaking to snakes. Those cold creatures had answered him, obeyed him. He had felt like a king among serpents. It had been Nagini who had first shown him this power. He had never expected to see her again. "Good girl. He tricked you and made you obey him, didn't he?" Voldemort's voice softened, almost gentle. He spoke to Nagini in Parseltongue, a subtle weave of magic and influence. The snake had little practical value, but she was a living link to his extraordinary past, the proof of a power that set him apart, born to rule. As he spoke, Confusion crossed Nagini's face. Voldemort released the compulsion pinning her, yet she did not strike him. She lifted the upper part of her body, tongue flicking, and when Voldemort extended his hand, she coiled toward it, the old recognition returning. She hesitated, turning uncertainly toward Cyrus as well, as if trying to remember which of the two had been the one from her past. Voldemort hissed, hoarse and commanding, "Return to my side, Nagini. He is not your friend. I am." He forced memories into her with his words. Nagini settled by his feet, her dangerous eyes sweeping everyone else. Cyrus barked a command. "Back, Nagini!" But she ignored him. Voldemort smiled with triumph, laying his palm on her head before fixing Cyrus with a cold look. "See? You thought you could take something from me. What is mine remains mine." His tone snapped like a blade, including Slytherin's wand and your soul. Regaining Nagini's trust pleased him more than any other victory. She was hardly a great fighter, perhaps weaker than the mutated rune spore, but from the Elder Wand to Nagini, Voldemort delighted in stripping Cyrus of everything. He wanted to watch Cyrus lose it piece by piece until he had nothing left. What he did not notice was the human intelligence still lurking in Nagini's eyes. Voldemort could bend snakes to his will, but Nagini's body concealed a human part that could never be entirely suppressed. He also did not realize that Cyrus had never intended to have Nagini kill him. Letting the snake loose had been part of Cyrus's plan. She would be a crucial link. Cyrus lowered his gaze, golden pupils half hidden, and kept fighting. He held the third Elder Wand. Though it granted him power, Voldemort still had an Elder Wand of his own, and that wand's origins were questionable. Morgana's legacy had passed to Harry. Cyrus was under enormous pressure. His magic lagged behind Voldemort's. He kept pouring ancient magic into his spells to close the gap. Lightning gathered in his hands until he was almost wrapped in it. The flash was blinding, so intense that Harry and all watchers outside squinted through tears. Voldemort seemed untroubled. A flick of his wand shattered the lightning. "Nagini, step back," he ordered. He did not need her to do anything but stand by his side. Her presence was the affirmation of his majesty, a god accompanied by wild beasts. He was no longer playing cat and mouse in the ministry. He was unleashing his full force. Each strike made the castle tremble. Stones crumbled and reformed as his power distorted the very air. Cyrus fought while retreating. Harry had stopped watching and joined him, inexperienced but useful. His accumulated skill helped relieve some of the pressure. They fought their way from the fifth-floor corridor, tearing through the house. Cyrus rode a torrent of flame, a pillar blasting down through 2 floors of the castle. They plummeted to the 3rd floor. To avoid Voldemort's spell, Harry crashed through a bathroom door. No one cared now about proprieties. Moaning Myrtle was gone. Harry hadn't seen a single ghost en route. It felt as if the dead had returned to their places. Death? Harry wondered, but there was no time. A stray spell scorched past his face. Its afterburn stung his eyes. "Don't be distracted," Cyrus said quietly. They were close, but Harry's concentration wavered. Cyrus never wavered. Voldemort entered through the blasted doorway, and for the briefest moment something like nostalgia crossed his features. This was where he had found the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. He had never expected Slytherin to hide the entry behind a girl's restroom. Had he known, he might have found it sooner. Back then, he had already turned every corner of Hogwarts and even discovered the Room of Requirement. Chamber of Secrets. How fitting, Voldemort said, a dry humor in his voice. "You were reborn here, weren't you? Found your body in this place. Decades ago, I claimed Slytherin's legacy here and confirmed my bloodline. Destiny, wouldn't you say? Perhaps we should end things now in the place where it all began." Cyrus's voice held no drama. Everything had unfolded according to his plan. If there was an ending, it would be Voldemort's. "If you want the gutter as your grave, be my guest," he said coldly. Voldemort's black power swelled around him, the magic warping the air. His words took on a hiss through glass and water, Parseltongue. Harry heard it clearly. Open. At Voldemort's command, the Chamber of Secrets, sealed and legendary, revealed itself, the ancient secrets of Slytherin unreeled before them. "Come," Voldemort bowed minutely, as if inviting them in. Then, with that same brusque enthusiasm of a host who means you harm, he unleashed fiendfire. He sealed the exits. Flames crawled along the pipes, Acrid smoke stabbed at Harry's eyes, nose, throat. Tears streamed down his cheeks as if he had been punched in both eye sockets. He tried to break out, but Cyrus held his wrist. Go! Voldemort's magic stoked the fiendfire into a fury greater than before. Monstrous faces formed in the flames, craning toward them. Breaking through was pointless. The fire's twisted mouths lunged. Harry panicked, only for Cyrus to pull him into a protective infernal veil, their own ring of fire. Cyrus carried Harry like a meteor as they plunged into the piping. Voldemort sneered and followed, turning to smoke, then a tremendous roar as the chamber filled with flame. The damp cold of the cavern dried, the basilisk's shed skin blackened to charcoal. The inferno broke through the final metal gate and, under the stare of the great Slytherin statue, poured into the black lake. Steam screamed up as the flames met the water. The shallow lake scabbed and dried in an instant. Boiling steam burst free and seared Harry's skin. Ah, he cried, the heat like knives. He had thought himself impervious to water and fire, yet the steam scalded him. Cyrus's shield had protected him from the worst, but the chamber filled with thick, choking mist. They could see nothing. Voldemort could see nothing. For a moment the world was white and raw and close. Cyrus nodded through the haze, a small signal. Now. Harry took the holly wand from his pocket, the simple wand he had kept for years, and held it in his right hand. He hid the true Elder Wand. He still was its master, but he did not need that consuming power. In his left hand, slick with sweat, he clutched the resurrection stone. He could feel his parents close when he held it. It steadied him. He stepped forward into the mist. Clear footsteps echoed in the empty chamber. Patta, patta. A faint hiss answered, the sliding wet sound of a serpent. Voldemort had come. Their shapes met in the vapor. Voldemort narrowed his eyes, perhaps thinking the two Cyruses had finally fused into one. To be honest, you should have done this sooner, Voldemort said. Gathering your strength gives you a fighting chance. Scattered power is insignificant. You're right, Harry said. He lifted the plain holly wand, voice steady. Because I'm going to kill you here. Voldemort leaned his head back a little, face hard with cold contempt. I will kill you, you despicable impostor, under Slytherin's witness. The Elder Wand flashed green. Avada Kedavra! Green light bloomed, illuminating every droplet of water in the air. Harry did not raise his wand to block. He did not move to defend. He simply stood, as if accepting what must come, and the green light sped toward him. The spell struck Harry in the chest. The blast echoed through the Chamber of Secrets like a thunderclap. The chamber was a valley of thick, clinging steam. The light from the spell diffused in the vapor, beautiful and nebulous. Harry cried out, but Lord Voldemort didn't actually hear him. The cry came from himself. When the curse hit Harry, it felt as if it had struck Voldemort as well, a ripping, soul-deep pain that sent him flying backward like a puppet with its strings cut. Voldemort hit the ground hard and lay still, unconscious, as if dead. Cyrus barely reacted. He had once carried fragments of Voldemort's soul inside him, but he had long since devoured and absorbed them. They no longer held any pull over him. Through the steaming haze, he looked at Harry. The boy lay peaceful, as if asleep. The resurrection stone slipped from his palm, faintly glowing. Then Cyrus looked back at Voldemort. The Dark Lord's soul had been linked to Harry's. The killing curse that struck Harry had also wounded Voldemort's own soul. Voldemort would be very weak. But Cyrus also knew that this Voldemort's soul was more intact than the one in the original story. Whatever weakness he showed now would not last long. He'd wake soon. This was the best moment to finish him, but Cyrus did not move toward the fallen Dark Lord. Instead, he crouched beside Harry and laid his hand on the boy's chest. There was no old sage here to guide Harry's spirit. Cyrus had promised to keep him alive. He would not let the boy choose death in a moment of confusion. He took his snakewood wand and pressed it to his temple. His consciousness sank. It was like slipping into a silent, still ocean. The world went black and then lightened into a misty white. Cyrus found himself standing in a place that was not quite real, a city of fog that felt like London in another decade, where everything seemed unfinished and luminescent. He moved forward, though there was no true sense of direction. The place rearranged itself to suit his intent. Soon he found Harry, newly awake and astonished to see him. "Cyrus, you died too?" the boy blurted, leaping up. 1,000 questions crowded his eyes, but the first thing he did was check on Cyrus. Cyrus felt awkward. Harry had woken unclothed. "Put something on first," he said, smiling. "If Dumbledore were here, he'd probably comment on your little wand." With a small motion, a set of robes appeared around Harry's shoulders. Robes with a scarlet color, Gryffindor colors. They suited him. Cyrus conjured a chair big enough for two and invited Harry to sit. "Sit," he said lightly. "I hope you don't want tea right now, because I can't conjure it." "Where is this?" Harry asked, bewildered. "I thought I was dead. I thought you shouldn't be." Harry looked at Cyrus, as if testing whether this was the afterlife. Cyrus chuckled. "No," he said, "this place belongs to you." Harry glanced around properly for the first time. The mist coalesced into a perfect likeness of King's Cross Station. High domes, ancient platforms stretching away underfoot. At the thought, the space rearranged. The station seemed to respond to his memory. Harry smiled. King's Cross was where his life had truly begun, where he'd stepped through the barrier into a world that had once been a stranger. He pictured the pillars, hoped for a way to Platform 9. Then another sound caught him, a soft, desperate thumping, like something tiny and flapping. It came from beneath the chair where he'd been sitting. When he looked down, he felt a revulsion he couldn't name. A naked infant, curled and shivering on the cold stone, its skin raw and red, discarded and struggling for breath. It was hideous in a way that made him want to step back. "That's what?" Harry breathed. Cyrus stood, impassive. "What else would be so ugly and pitiable and make you want to look away?" he asked. A thought flashed into Harry's mind. Lord Voldemort. Even the handsome face the Dark Lord wore hid something foul and tiny, an ugly, stunted fragment of soul. "It's the piece from my scar, isn't it?" Harry guessed. "Yes." Cyrus watched the small thing stretch out red, stubby hands toward them as if begging for help. It was pathetic and offensive in equal measure. Cyrus did not hesitate. He raised his wand. "Incendio!" The fragment burst into ash before Harry's eyes. "Now he's dead," Cyrus said matter-of-factly. Harry absorbed that and then remembered the blow to his chest. "What about me? Am I dead?" He touched his chest. There was no wound, no pain. "You're not dead, Harry." Cyrus's tone softened. He crouched in a brotherly way beside the boy. "Neither Dumbledore nor I ever intended for you to sacrifice yourself. The Hallows protect you, but not by making you invulnerable. They give you a chance. That's what the Resurrection Stone did, gave you a chance to refuse death." Harry opened his palm and saw the stone lying there, inexplicably present. Cyrus explained, patient and plain. "Voldemort's killing curse struck both of you because your souls were linked. It wounded him as it wounded you, but your protection was different. The Hallows don't bring people back from the dead. They make you master of death in the sense that you can face it and still choose how to return to life. Do you remember the tale of Death and the Three Brothers?" Harry nodded. The third brother used the invisibility cloak to evade death. He greeted death as an old friend when his time came. "Exactly." Cyrus met his eyes. "Voldemort wanted immortality. He tried to conquer death, to refuse it. But you, by facing death bravely, by being willing to meet it, have a different mastery. You didn't run, and the Elder Wand didn't choose Voldemort because he wasn't worthy of it." Harry's face tightened. "So you and Dumbledore already knew I wouldn't die?" Cyrus shook his head. "We knew you were brave enough to try. That's not the same thing." His voice was tender. "You did what you had to do." Harry felt foolish and slightly betrayed. He had steeled himself nights ago for his own death. But Cyrus only smiled and patted his shoulder. "Are you ready to go back?" he asked. Harry blinked. "Back where?" Cyrus looked toward tracks that ran off into the fog, like any passenger waiting for a train. "This is King's Cross," he said. "It's a hub. Trains leave for different places. There's only one train here that goes to Hogwarts." A whistle sounded in the distance. A green train slid into the station, its doors open, as if inviting them aboard. Harry hesitated. "If I go back, Voldemort's still alive. He's powerful. He has the Elder Wand. If I live, I have to keep fighting him." Cyrus met him evenly. "And what if we both fail? You could be the only one left to face losing more people. You'll feel helpless. You'll have to survive pain and fear." Harry's resolve hardened. "Then I have to go back." "Then what are you waiting for?" Cyrus said. The train stood ready. Harry, without another word, turned and ran toward the wall he had to charge through. The Hogwarts train always left from one place, platform 9. Cyrus didn't know how long he had been inside Harry's consciousness space. It felt like a dream, could have been a second, could have been an entire night. The important thing was, they were both still alive. Voldemort's magic must not have fully recovered. Cyrus looked up, searching for the Dark Lord. Nothing had changed since he'd last looked, except Nagini now lay coiled beside him, alert and watchful. Harry woke. It seemed he had returned to his body in time. Cyrus didn't greet him. Almost at the same moment, Harry opened his eyes. Voldemort's ragdoll form also stirred. He lay twisted on the floor, limbs bent at odd angles, his sharp, cruel face flattened against the stone like a snake's. "You are so foolish, Cyrus," Voldemort sneered as soon as he was conscious. "Is this your plan?" He laughed, venomous. "Hiding behind, letting Harry Potter risk himself just to destroy that one bit of my soul?" Voldemort's face was contemptuous, as if listening to a child's naive boast. Cyrus answered simply, "The plan worked." Cyrus wondered how Voldemort knew what had happened. Harry hadn't fully reformed yet. Perhaps, while the last Horcrux was still part of Harry's soul, Voldemort had perceived everything that happened to it. After all, in Harry's inner world, Cyrus had been able to peer through that fragment and destroy it. Voldemort could not have seen everything that followed, only guessed. So he assumed Cyrus's scheme had been only to destroy the Horcrux and strip him of immortality. Voldemort smirked. "I don't know that destroying something I no longer care about counts as a success," he said, getting to his feet with sarcasm. He had always thought the Horcruxes were the key to his invulnerability, but now they seemed irrelevant to him. Watching Cyrus's little drama had been amusing, though, more useful than he'd expected. "You destroyed a Horcrux. What of it?" He leaned forward, relishing the moment, eager to see despair on Cyrus's face. "My magic is unchanged." "If you wanted to kill me, you should have done so before I woke," Voldemort continued, pointing at Harry like he was disgusted. "You missed your chance, just to save him." Harry felt sick at Voldemort's words. Did Cyrus sacrifice the moment to kill Voldemort just to pull Harry back from the brink? If that were true, Harry couldn't accept it. His own life was small compared to stopping Voldemort. If Cyrus had saved him, there would only be one more orphan in the world. If Voldemort lived, how many more innocents would suffer? Harry had always been willing to give his life to stop that. "Cyrus, you shouldn't have saved me," Harry said, voice tight. "My life isn't important." Cyrus cut him off. "We don't bargain like that, Harry." He stepped forward. "Besides, we all agree your life means more. Warm, upright, kind, selfless. You have a good heart. You matter." Harry flushed with embarrassment before he could respond. Cyrus raised a hand and drew the enormous raw power that had been inside Harry back into himself. It felt like strands of silk being stripped away. Harry went weak, as if his bones had been hollowed out. He stumbled, nearly fell, but Cyrus caught him. Though that power had never truly belonged to Harry, having it and losing it left a hollow ache. "All right, leave this to me now." Cyrus said, "Go." "But you," Harry began, but the intensity of Cyrus's restored power made the rest of his words falter. Harry had been terrified of Voldemort. After their clashes, his mind had been filled with awe for that terrible wizard's power. He nearly forgot that Cyrus was the one who had actually driven Voldemort back. He remembered the prophecy, the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. "Born as the 7th month dies." But the line that had once seemed destiny now seemed less important. Standing behind Cyrus, watching the dark green cloak ripple in the cold, the gold streak of his hair catching the light like sunlight, Harry felt an unexpected, fierce confidence. Cyrus would do it. He wouldn't give Voldemort another chance. Voldemort didn't share that confidence. "Do you think you can win?" he hissed at Cyrus. "I am as powerful as you, perhaps more, and I hold the Elder Wand." He paused, checking if the Elder Wand still answered him. It did. He smiled, all the smugness of a man certain of his weapon. "What about you?" he demanded. "He has the Elder Wand too," Harry blurted, unwilling to be silenced. Voldemort sneered at the interruption. Harry drew his own wand to answer, but as soon as he lifted it, he felt wrongness. His wand was drained, empty of its former force, like a beautiful stick with no core. The power he had last felt there was gone. Voldemort tilted his head, almost kindly. "You forget, Harry. I bested you." Voldemort's spell had struck true. He had taken control of the Elder Wand. Harry's heart sunk. If anything happened to Cyrus now, he would blame himself. Cyrus, however, calmly produced a wand he had been using and raised it. "You forget I have a third Elder Wand." The wand in his hand seemed to hum with light. For a moment, hope flared in Harry's chest. Voldemort scoffed. A third Elder Wand? Impossible. After his resurrection, he had destroyed the core of the time chamber to prevent anyone from repeating his time-crossing tricks. Time travel to change the past was, as far as he knew, impossible. If a third Elder Wand existed, it could only be an illusion, which, in truth, it was. The illusory wand created during Fitzgerald's trial, a drawn copy of the real Elder Wand. It could be powerful, but sustained high-intensity combat against the true wand would be difficult. Cyrus made no rebuttal. He held the wand before him as a knight might hold a sword. Then a new sound cut through the tension, the soft spread of golden footprints across the stone, circling once and then aligning with Harry's own soles. A hominum revelio charm. Someone was approaching. They all froze. If anyone would come now, it would decide everything. Cyrus was the only one who did not seem surprised. He knew who it would be. Voldemort tensed. Harry's throat tightened. Gellert Grindelwald stepped through the flame-melted threshold of the Chamber of Secrets. Short white hair, trench coat, eyes all arrogance. Harry felt his last hope die inside him. Grindelwald's arrival meant Dumbledore had fallen. It meant the balance of power had completely shifted. Voldemort's voice changed into an excited chuckle. "Ah, Grindelwald, you've come." Cyrus watched without moving. Grindelwald swept an arrogant gaze over the room and approached Cyrus and Harry, as if the entire scene were a stage. Nagini hissed and raised herself toward the intruder, but Voldemort calmed her with a touch. "You're a bit rumpled, Lord Voldemort," Grindelwald said as he walked up to him. He paused just a few steps from the Dark Lord and eyed the Elder Wand in Voldemort's hand. Their history mattered. There had been an unbreakable vow of sorts between them, and Grindelwald knew the loopholes of oaths as well as anyone. On the high platforms above the Quidditch pitch, Barty watched in fury. He ripped at the air with curses. "Liar! Traitor!" But the Death Eaters were already surrounded by Aurors. Any rash move would be met with a counterstrike. Bella sneered and crowed that her master would prevail. Grindelwald only had to reach out and take the wand. Then another voice cut through the chamber, low and measured. "Stay still, Grindelwald." Everyone turned toward the darkness. Even Cyrus looked surprised. From the shadows stepped a slender, sickly figure, Severus Snape. He moved like a man on a last thread, his wand pressed flat against Grindelwald's lower back, as if it were the barrel of a gun. "Don't move, Grindelwald," Snape said, his voice stripped of its usual barbed venom and sounding more exhausted than fierce. "Stay away from the Dark Lord, or it's death." 248. Voldemort's Destruction. Snape's arrival had surprised most of those present, but for Barty, who had been on the Quidditch pitch, it was a moment of unalloyed joy. He had never been so happy to see Snape as he was then, especially when Snape appeared just in time to stop Grindelwald. "I misjudged his loyalty," Barty laughed, relief and satisfaction written across his face as he glanced at Bella. If Cyrus and Grindelwald had truly teamed up against Voldemort, together they might have beaten him, though killing him would still have been difficult. Voldemort was like a venomous snake that could shed and slither away. Grindelwald, however, froze the instant Snape arrived. Not because Snape threatened him. Snape was powerful, but not on Grindelwald's level, but because of Voldemort. When Voldemort was warned by Snape, Grindelwald knew he would never claim the Elder Wand. He slipped back, creating distance to avoid being struck, and turned to Cyrus with a rueful look. "Kid, I'm out of options. I can't move against him. You'll have to handle this yourself." Grindelwald had made an unbreakable vow with Voldemort long ago. He could exploit small loopholes, but he could not directly oppose him. "The plan failed, and there's nothing I can do," he admitted. Cyrus seemed unfazed. His eyes turned toward Snape, who approached with a sour, sullen look. "I heard you took part in the attack on Harry Severus," Cyrus said, his tone measured. "We got along in Godric's Hollow once. Why did you betray me? Why did you return to Voldemort's side? Will you be his servant instead of my friend?" "Friend?" Snape's sneer was instant, like the caustic expression he wore in potions class, the look that preceded a string of cutting, contemptuous remarks. He did not reach for coarse language this time, but his words were no less sharp. "You gave the resurrection stone to Harry Potter, not me," he spat. "You knew I needed it. Does that sound like friendship?" Voldemort, still looking weakened, smiled triumphantly. Between Snape and Cyrus, his gaze flicked, but he said nothing. Harry, incensed, shouted at Snape, "I told you the resurrection stone can't truly bring someone back." Harry had learned enough of Snape's past during their occlumency practice to see fragments of those old memories, and Lily's lingering soul had shown him more. He understood now. He didn't want her truly alive. He shouted, "I don't need her to be a living person." Snape's face contorted in fury and hysteria as he stared at Harry, as if he were the enemy who had wronged him most in life. "I need her by my side. That's enough." He clenched his fists, greedy and selfish. He wanted possession of Lily Evans, not her life. He exhaled and sagged, a moment of terrible, devoted bliss crossing his features. "The Dark Lord promised me the resurrection stone after this," he said. "I'll get what I want." His arms spread as if already enfolding an imagined lily. Harry recoiled inwardly. The sight was nauseating, the greasy, unkempt man who had long coveted his mother, transformed by lust and longing. "My mother was right to stay away from you," Harry hissed. "You're pathetic." Harry tore into Snape with everything he had. "You think it was one word, mudblood, that kept you from her? You're wrong. You were never on the same path. You mixed with purebloods, joined Death Eater circles, toyed with the dark arts, looked down on muggles and muggleborns. You felt superior because you thought you had better blood." Snape's body shook. He was pale, ravaged by the truth of Harry's accusations. His early life, a hateful muggle father, the sting of exclusion, had made him detest muggles and cling to resentments. He had looked down on Lily's blood at times, and the label mudblood had lodged in him like a blade. Harry pressed his advantage. "You were worse than your father," he said. "You were a Death Eater from the moment you first walked into school. Even when you turned, it was only for Lily. Your heart was barren except for twisted love and hatred for James and for Voldemort, who took the one person you loved. You didn't care how many people Voldemort killed. You didn't care about anyone else." Harry's words cut. They could not make Snape compassionate, but they stung. Cyrus, however, struck truer. "Are you sure he'll give you the resurrection stone, Severus? He tricked you once already." Voldemort's jaw tightened. A decade ago, he had killed Lily despite assurances to Snape. Now his voice came smooth and calculated. "That time I erred. I have apologized to Severus." He drew out the resurrection stone, which glowed like a little sun in his palm. "I thought Lily was insignificant then. I misjudged what others needed. Severus wants this, so I will give it." His words dripped with provocation. He knew Cyrus could not match that offer. "Some things I can do that you cannot, Cyrus," Voldemort said with triumphant coldness. "That is your failure." He held the stone up to Snape like a prize. "Come, Severus, this is for you, an apology and a reward." Snape reached out with trembling hands. For a moment he seemed to reach for Lily's imagined skin rather than the stone. Then fear seized him. Like a moth to a flame, he felt the yearning and the pain. Voldemort encouraged him. "I will help you resurrect Lily Evans. From now on, she will belong only to you. She will be your canary." Something in Snape snapped. His hand shot out, not for the stone, but for the Elder Wand in Voldemort's grasp. Voldemort's face flashed with surprise. Snape had not intended merely to take the wand. When he felt he could not wrest it free, one desperate, violent thought drove him. Break it. He lunged and struck. For an instant there was a struggle. Voldemort, though weakened, was terrifyingly powerful, and he answered with a savage force that lifted Snape off his feet. Snape gripped the wand and set his strength to it. When he could not tug it away, he broke it. "How dare you!" Voldemort felt rage like oil set on fire inside him. He seized Snape's other arm, snatched the broken piece of Snape's wand from his hand, snapped Snape's arm, and hurled him to the ground as if he were a discarded sack. The sight of Snape hurled and howling made Harry's hatred surge anew. "How dare you betray me, Snape!" Voldemort roared, his features distorted into something monstrous. "You ruined everything for me. I promised you the resurrection stone. I can give you what others cannot, and you." His voice broke like a curse. He lifted his chin and snarled, waiting for the spectacle. "Nagini, eat." he commanded. But Nagini did not answer. Voldemort's eyes flicked around, shock and confusion cutting through his fury. Cyrus's voice, mocking, came from nearby. Voldemort saw Cyrus kneeling with the great snake, and Nagini offering something dark and smooth into his hands, the resurrection stone. "You thought Nagini would obey you?" Cyrus said. He cradled the obsidian stone, watching Voldemort as if amused by the ruin on his face. "You're not the only one with Parseltongue. You said there are things only you can do," Cyrus continued, eyes on Snape, "but you never understood why Severus would still betray you even after you promised him the stone." Voldemort, enraged and bewildered, would not hear it. "I haven't lost yet," he barked. "I still have power. I am the master of the Elder Wand." "Is that your dream?" Harry sneered, but Voldemort did not wait. With a sudden, feral flick, he cried, "Expelliarmus!" The spell struck Harry. He was thrown back. 2 wands flew from his robes and landed in Voldemort's hand. Voldemort contemptuously tossed aside the holly wand and Snape's broken wand, and, eyes glittering, turned to Cyrus. "See, I am still master of the other Elder Wand." "Avada Kedavra!" Green light roared toward Cyrus. The killing curse filled the Chamber of Secrets with the smell of ozone and death. Voldemort felt vindicated. His foe's plans had failed. He held the wand. He would dominate. But Cyrus did not flinch. He took the killing curse full on, as if accepting an inevitable blow. Voldemort's expression shifted from triumph to terror as Cyrus reached out under that green light. "This is impossible," Voldemort stammered. He looked down at the wand in his own hand. Where once lay the Elder Wand, now lay nothing but ash, crumbling like burnt wood. "Did you think I would let you take the Elder Wand from Harry?" Cyrus asked quietly. Years before, he had planned for this. The true Elder Wand had never been Voldemort's. Cyrus had it. Cyrus picked up the genuine Elder Wand, the true, unparalleled artifact, and Voldemort's greed fixed on it like a hunger. But Cyrus let the broken, worthless wand fall from his hand as if it were nothing. Then, with calm inevitability, he raised the real wand and cast Avada Kedavra. Green lightning slammed into Voldemort. The castle shuddered as if struck at its heart. A terrible silence followed. Sigh. Then the shattered world around them gave way. Voldemort's gaunt form crumpled. His body, with the arrogance of a tyrant finally undone, fell into ruin. The chamber echoed with the finality of it. The dark legend, the name that had haunted wizards for an age, was undone. Lord Voldemort died just like that. There was no spectacular duel worthy of his reputation. He simply fell at Cyrus's hands, as ordinary as any witch, wizard, or muggle he had murdered during the war. When Harry looked at the lifeless body, it felt unreal. He half expected the man to rise again, as he had done before. "He just died like that?" Harry asked. "What else could happen?" Cyrus replied softly. He stepped closer to the corpse. Voldemort's eyes were still open. The irises were a flat gray. Even in death, his expression was savage, as if cursing the world. Harry struggled for words. "I didn't expect it." "He was Lord Voldemort," Harry went on, trying to put the feeling into words. "He killed so many. His magic was so strong. His death just seems," he fumbled for a word, "anticlimactic?" Cyrus shook his head as if amused. He never cared for those he thought beneath him, muggles, half-breeds. He believed himself superior, untouchable. He circled the body, speaking with the calm, clinical tone of someone describing a specimen. "He looked everywhere for proof of that superiority," Cyrus continued. "He found the gaunt line, traces of very old blood, Slytherin, perhaps even something of the Peverils. He thought that pedigree could make him something other than a mortal." Harry watched Voldemort's face and felt the truth of Cyrus's words. The wizard had truly believed he was owed greatness. "So in the end, he was just human," Harry said. "Exactly," Cyrus said. "A child with a dangerous toy who never learned right from wrong. He mistook talent for destiny. He was powerful, but power isn't the same as greatness." He looked at Harry. His soul was already broken, patched together. All that bluster hid something weak and cowardly. Harry thought of the people who had died by Voldemort's hand. Fighters, innocents, families. He felt sick that such evil could reduce to such a small, ordinary end. Snape, who had been listening without expression, finally spoke in his dry, contemptuous tone. "It's simple, because it wasn't the Elder Wand." Harry blinked. Snape's manner was as biting as ever. "You think Cyrus and Dumbledore planned everything for years, accounting for the possibility of my failure, only to leave you as the flaw? He said. If I failed, Nagini would have finished the job. She never betrayed Cyrus. She was always his safeguard. Where did the third Elder Wand come from? Harry asked. That's another story. Cyrus hesitated, then explained. Not long ago, I was tracing remnants of ancient magic. The four guardians set trials to protect it. One trial held a magical illusion that contained a false Elder Wand. So the third Elder Wand was fake from the start, Harry realized aloud, but the illusion's wand seemed to act like the real thing. The magic inside an illusion can only exist within it, Cyrus said. It can't be brought into the real world. Harry felt that statement contradict the memory of the wand's power. Cyrus only smiled, enigmatic. Then Snape, sharp as ever, cut in. How do you know this is the real world? He sneered. What? Harry started. Idiot, Snape snapped. Haven't you noticed this Hogwarts has been wrong from the beginning? He had already healed his arm with a potion. A comminuted fracture was a nuisance at best for a wizard. Harry tried to protest, but found his attention drawn around the castle. He had been so focused on death, he hadn't noticed small oddities. The light in the castle had been oddly gray, as if viewed through a pensieve. There were no familiar portraits along the walls, no ghosts drifted about, and remarkably, no Peeves. Cyrus merely pointed to the floor. Harry looked down. The puddle at his feet reflected like ink spread on a faded parchment painting. Cyrus snapped his fingers, and the Chamber of Secrets seemed to shudder. It was as if a thin gray veil peeled away from everything. Colors sharpened, the air felt clearer. Harry's senses brightened. This was an illusion, Cyrus said. The three of us wrapped Hogwarts in it. Grindelwald, who had stood nearby with the odd tenderness of someone watching a favored pupil, nodded. He looked at Harry now with something like grandfatherly pride rather than rivalry. Let's leave, Cyrus added dryly. To be honest, I never liked the Chamber of Secrets. Outside, on the Quidditch pitch, the changes in the castle hadn't been noticed by everyone. They could see but not hear, but they had already watched a battle show Voldemort's power in full. His sudden death stunned them. For a long moment, over 1,000 people were silent, as if the world held its breath. Someone finally said it aloud, a tiny voice that became a stone thrown into still water. He's dead. The cry spread until the whole crowd erupted. You know who is dead, shouted one, and then another. Lee Jordan, excitable as ever, leapt onto a chair, tossed his wizarding hat into the air, and with a shout blasted it to pieces with a charm. McGonagall, who would normally have scolded him into an awkward silence, couldn't quite keep her stern face. Her mouth tilted at the corners. Statues around the stadium seemed to stir. The students, led by Lee, shouted and cheered. The refrain rose in waves, taken up by Durmstrang and Beauxbaton pupils as readily as the British ones. You know who is dead. Long live Cyrus. Someone, McGonagall suspected Ron, called out, If he's dead, why do we still call him you-know-who? A second chorus corrected the name. Lord Voldemort is dead. No, Tom is dead, Ron insisted, which made Hannah a little annoyed. Her uncle Tom, who owned the Leaky Cauldron, was no one's namesake for a Dark Lord. Tom Riddle had been arrogant, certainly, but he had been, in the end, just a man with an ordinary name. 250. The Breath of Time. The Dark Shadow of the Chuji Pavilion. Cyrus, widely recognized as the greatest wizard alongside Albus Dumbledore and now Principal of Ilvermorny, rose to fame in 1995 after defeating the Dark Lord Voldemort. In the Great Hall of Hogwarts, Neville held a struggling chocolate frog in one hand and a newly obtained card in the other. He read every line, and as the meaning sunk in his face, flushed with excitement. I got it! He nearly leapt onto the table, brandishing the card. The chocolate frog slipped free, hopped to the floor, and disappeared between benches, but Neville barely noticed. Cyrus's card! Hundreds of students crowded around, everyone stretching fingers to touch the legendary card. Only Harry and a few of his friends, seated a short distance away, stayed calm, though they too felt the stir. The news of Cyrus defeating Voldemort during the Triwizard Tournament had spread far and wide. Neville's grandmother, who had once resented Cyrus, had at last softened. Cyrus had even used ancient magic to heal Neville's parents, and for that, Neville held him in deep respect, though not everyone harmed by Voldemort had been so fortunate. Cyrus's chocolate frog card's gotta be the rarest now, right? Harry asked, sipping his pumpkin juice. He dabbled in collecting, but wasn't fanatical about it. Ron, by contrast, was obsessed. Rarer than a Cornelius Agrippa card, Ron said, though he didn't join the crush. Cyrus had promised each of them a collector's edition card that Christmas. He's huge now, isn't he? Ron teased. You won't be seeing him much. Want Mum to ship you off to Ilvermorny tomorrow? Ginny snapped. No need, you idiot. She never treated him like a brother, at least not indulgently. You should worry about your OOLs. I hope, idiot, you can at least pass a few. Ron rolled his eyes, but Hermione approved. Ginny's right, she said gravely. The OOLs decide what you can study in 6th year. If you don't get enough, you might repeat the year, or worse, you could be left with not good prospects. You always sound so bleak, Ron muttered. He was certain neither he nor Harry would fail. By his count, he'd get 3 to 5 passes, and Harry likely more, given what he'd learned last year from Dumbledore. I'm just stating facts, Hermione replied coldly. Harry, being famous won't get you extra marks. Harry, always the innocent target of the group's barbs, made a face. If only the Triwizard Tournament were held this year, then I could skip the junior wizard exam, he said. Last semester, Cedric had avoided some exams because of the tournament and had come away with top marks. You wish, Ron grunted. I wouldn't get to compete anyway, Ginny said with regret. It's every 4 years. By the next one I'll have graduated. It's not fair. I was too young for this one. Don't be daft, Ron said, shaking his head. Look at what happened. It's not worth risking your life for an exam prize. He looked at Hermione. What about you? Got any plans? I have a plan, Hermione said with pride, lifting her chin. Cyrus hopes I'll become Minister for Magic someday. The table fell quiet. Even the din around Neville seemed distant. Hermione's confidence wavered as the friends exchanged looks. Do you really want to be minister? That's mad. Are you trying to be Percy reincarnated? Ron scoffed. Having one power-hungry relative in the family was enough. He couldn't imagine Hermione wanting that too. Need me to borrow Percy's favorite book, How Prefects Gain Power? You'll be sorry, Hermione snapped. Harry and Ginny softened a little. Hermione, I don't mean to be harsh, Harry said. You're brilliant, and I'm sure you could work at the ministry when you graduate. But being minister isn't just about being brilliant. Background helps? Hermione prompted. No, political clout. Harry had learned a lot about power. When Fudge had been unpopular, he'd been closer to Dumbledore, and Harry's mistakes had been treated differently. In his 3rd year, he'd broken rules and should have been expelled, but the ministry had been lenient. Later things changed. You need achievements and support, people to back you, otherwise you won't get the job. Ginny, quick to defend, snapped, Who says she won't have support? We have the Weasleys, the famous savior, and, more importantly, Cyrus will support her, she added, pride making her voice light. Cyrus's fame seemed to reflect on her, as if she were basking in it. Dad said that if Cyrus hinted at running, Fudge would have to step down and beg him to take the position. It wasn't idle boasting. Cyrus's current prestige in Britain was enormous. The Chocolate Frog card decreed he and Dumbledore the finest wizards. While greatest could be argued, Cyrus's power and reputation were beyond dispute. And unlike Dumbledore, who was genial and easily teased, Cyrus was not known for letting opponents off lightly. Harry leaned in, careful to keep his voice low. Most people were still gawking at Neville's card. I heard Dumbledore's planning to step down as president of the International Confederation of Wizards. The others' expressions shifted to shock. The Confederation was far more than a symbolic body. It held sway over magical governments worldwide. In the past, when Grindelwald rampaged across Europe, the Confederation had resisted. When Voldemort rose in Britain, the Confederation offered no aid, partly because Britain had stood aside during Grindelwald's crisis, and so when Britain needed help, it found none. Did Dumbledore really say that? Ron asked. Dumbledore told Grindelwald, Harry nodded. The notion that Dumbledore might vacate the presidency made them think of a successor, and Cyrus was the most obvious candidate. Not long ago, he'd been an enemy of the British ministry. Now he had transformed into one of the foremost figures in the wizarding world. Of course it's not certain, Harry added. Cyrus might not want the job, and Dumbledore and Grindelwald both doubt that Cyrus's proposals would win support. His proposals? Ron blinked. Probably to amend the Confederation's statute of secrecy. Ginny said. She found something odd and almost amusing about Dumbledore and Grindelwald consulting together on the matter. Weren't those the issues that sparked their war? I thought Dumbledore opposed breaking the statute. It wasn't just the statute, Harry said. Dumbledore opposed Grindelwald because of his methods, that cruelty. Grindelwald then was more ruthless than even Voldemort. That's why he's remembered as a dark wizard. Harry knew enough of history and whispered secrets to speak at length. They talked quietly, unaware that Cyrus himself stood within Hogwarts at that moment. In the room of requirement, beneath the gaze of 4 guardians, Cyrus stood upon a floor that shimmered like a starry sky, as if he were the axis of the firmament. Fitzgerald paced nearby. Before the third task began, he had sought Cyrus out to report an intruder in the room. At the time, Cyrus had been absorbed in plans against Voldemort and had not paid it much mind. Now he had come to search for clues. "Have you found anything?" Fitzgerald asked. "No obvious traces." Cyrus replied. He had considered that the intruder could have been nothing more than a temporal shadow left behind by Voldemort. Maybe the shadows he left in time have blended with the present. Shadows from other times? Luke Wood mused. None of them had seen the person clearly. The Guardians didn't think it had been Voldemort himself. If he had been, there would surely be residual magic. If it had been him, there would be marks, Percival said, stroking his goatee in his portrait. Use detection spells, like when you traced ancient magic. Cyrus's expression tightened. He drew his wand, snake-like wood, his face solemn. If the intruder were a shadow of Voldemort from the past, that would be one thing. But he had another suspicion. No record. Neither the Guardians' memories, Hogwarts enrollment rolls, nor ministry transfer papers from centuries past showed any sign of a mysterious transfer student. That didn't prove such a person hadn't existed. Perhaps someone had hidden in plain sight. But if this supposed transfer had taken the dark path, Morgana's legacy would have been seized long ago. If not, why hide it all? The truth lay in what had happened that night. Cyrus let his power flow and raised his wand. "Revelio," he intoned. "Hominum revelio," Fitzgerald added. Silver light unfurled like mist. The room remained still. Cyrus frowned. This time he tapped deeper, drawing on ancient magic. "Trace revelio." The smoke condensed, forming a hazy shadow that drifted like a ghost. Cyrus could not make out a clear face, but he was certain it was not Voldemort. "Too much time has passed," Fitzgerald muttered. "Time is not the obstacle." Cyrus flicked his wrist, and a small pocket watch slipped from between his fingers, its chain swinging. The watch face seemed to turn into a tiny pendulum. Time reversal. Golden halos burst outward from Cyrus at the command. For a fleeting instant, Fitzgerald and the others felt as if the breath of time itself uncoiled before them. Moments layered upon moments, and in that suspended space a dark shadow moved at the edge of their sight. 251. Person cursed by death time. Like death, it is an elemental, immutable magic in this world. It exists on its own. No wizard can command it at will, just as even the most powerful cannot escape death. Lord Voldemort exhausted every means to survive. Horcruxes, the resurrection stone. But in truth, since Lily's curse destroyed his body more than a decade ago, he was never truly alive. Even in his half-life, his span among wizards was short. He didn't live to be 90. Time Turner? Fitzgerald said, surprised. "I thought after the Ministry's time chamber was destroyed, time magic would be impossible to control." Time itself isn't summoned by the incantations on a time turner so much as by the sand of time. Most of that sand has been lost. The tiny time turner in Cyrus's hand should by rights be barely functional. But Cyrus's power was too fierce. Time became a toy in his palm. Golden rings of light spun backward. "Are you going to travel that far back?" Percival asked, alarmed. "You shouldn't. No one knows what that could do." Of course Voldemort had known. He once pushed time back decades and even used the time chamber to avoid time's penalties. But he'd passed those side effects on to others. Now, any reversal would demand an even higher price. "I'm not going to reverse time," Cyrus said calmly. "I only need to see the past." Unlike Voldemort, Cyrus still held a kind of reverence for the laws of nature. He avoided needless risk. Under the sway of time, the shadowy image grew clearer. Cyrus frowned. The figure looked ancient, hair sparse and brittle, his torso bent nearly double. He leaned on a walking stick, but Cyrus couldn't tell whether the stick or the wrist was more desiccated. The man looked like a walking mummy. Every step made Cyrus think the man might simply stop breathing. Whoever this was, he could not be a mere transfer student. Cyrus didn't believe a few hundred years could reduce a powerful wizard to such a state. This person was far older and steeped in dark arts. "Do you remember him?" Cyrus asked. There was something about the face that tugged at him, but the four guardians shook their heads. "No idea who he is," Luke Wood said. "The question is how he came to the Room of Requirement and why." "We'll see if he does anything else," Cyrus said. He continued to push his magic gently, palm curved, wrist turning as though winding time's mechanism. The zombie-like figure opened the starry floor and stepped into a sea of stars. "He went below," Cyrus said. "There's nothing left below the Room of Requirement," Senbakar said, puzzled. Most of the vast cavern had collapsed. Whatever this figure sought, it shouldn't be here. They watched the rewind, waiting for more. Suddenly, the image froze. "What's wrong?" Fitzgerald asked. Then the answer came in the next instant. The old man lifted his head. Now they could see his face, a map of wrinkles, the grooves deeper than the bark of the humping willow. His eyes were clouded, like rice and flour stirred into a paste. It was hard to believe those eyes could see, but he was not only seeing the path before him, he saw Cyrus in the present, across the torrent of time. He smiled, like someone peeling back dead skin, and then maggots poured from his body. Cyrus felt a chill. The images vanished. "He found us," Luke Wood snapped, his voice sharp. None of them had expected that from mere footage of the past. Whoever could view the future from the past had to possess terrifying power. Who was that? "No matter who he was, he's certainly not alive," Fitzgerald said quietly. The smell of death seemed woven into him. He looked as if he had crawled from the soil and still had decay writhing within. The guardians steadied themselves. Cyrus stood quietly, head bowed in thought. In his mind, he searched every memory, from the moment of his resurrection up to now, trying to find any trace of the man. He saw everything like a living pensieve. If he had encountered the man himself, there would be marks in his memory. But there was nothing. "Remember anything?" Luke asked. Cyrus shook his head. "If I'd truly met him, I would have found a trace. There's nothing." He changed tack. "Open the Room of Requirement's magical seal." The four guardians obliged. The hatch leading down yawned open once more. Cyrus descended the spiral staircase. Returning felt different now. Most of the cavern had collapsed. Rubble choked the paths and ruins lay everywhere. Hogwarts had not fallen, the protective enchantments held, but down here almost everything had been buried. Cyrus walked on. With a flick of his wrist, he shifted dozens of tons of stone from his way and rejoined broken paths with a thought. He reached the end, an empty chamber once lined in goblin-forged mithril, deep beneath Hogwarts, a heart beating along the earth's dragon vein, a vast, ancient core. "Do not disturb the sleeping dragon," ran the old warning. The dragon within him had gone to sleep, only an empty mithril shell remained. There was nothing here for the old man to want. Cyrus's gaze swept the hollow, and he realized something crucial was missing. "What do you intend to do with this thing?" Dumbledore pushed his half-moon spectacles up and stared at the object in Grindelwald's palm. "You don't mean to keep a pet, do you?" "You call this a pet?" Grindelwald chuckled and revealed its true form, a small black dragon. It was part of Morgana's legacy, the portion that had been taken by Voldemort. After Voldemort's death, it had not dissipated. Grindelwald had taken it. "This is immense power," Grindelwald said. "You don't want it?" He pinched a tail of the black dragon as if teasing a gecko. The creature, sorely annoyed, tried to nip his finger. "What would I do with it?" Dumbledore said, almost casually. He looked somehow younger in the conversation, relaxed. "I don't think it will be my era anymore. Great power is no longer useful to me." "Aren't you worried about Cyrus?" Grindelwald slipped the black dragon into his coat pocket and sat, graceful. "He wants to break the statute of secrecy. For all the years the statute has protected wizardkind, it has become part of the world's flesh. Tear it out and it will bleed." Grindelwald's voice was certain. "This isn't only a conflict between muggles and wizards, it will split wizards themselves." He was right. Most wizards are conservative, comfortable with the status quo. Like politicians, they avoid action until a crisis forces their hand. There are many who trust him and see him as a leader, Grindelwald went on, but his following is small compared to what I had. I used speeches, incitement, influence. Cyrus has done little. If he declares he will unravel the statute, not many will rally. Dumbledore considered. Opposition meant conflict. Do you think he'll act violently? Grindelwald asked. I doubt Cyrus will follow your path, Dumbledore replied. He still had faith in Cyrus. Do you really know him? Grindelwald pressed. Do you know why he wants to break the statute, whether for himself or for wizarding kind? Even noble ends can be dressed in dangerous means. 50 years ago, Grindelwald claimed the cause of wizards. Dumbledore stood with muggles. What of Cyrus? Grindelwald suspected Cyrus might be in it for himself. And what is his program? Has he any practical plan? Or will he try to force the change with violence? Grindelwald's tone was blunt, almost dismissive, but the questions were urgent. His ideas are vague. If he missteps, muggles will be turned against wizards, conservative wizards will fight reformers, and his own followers could tear themselves apart. Even among reformers, there are radicals and moderates. The wizarding world could plunge into chaos. Even if Cyrus never meant to start a war, he might unleash one he can't stop. Dumbledore's worry deepened. He could not claim pure selflessness, but his view had been shaped by thinking of the whole rather than the individual. I'll make time to speak with him, he said. His main concern remained Cyrus himself. Cyrus wanted to break the statute to dominate both worlds simultaneously. He did not care for mere titles. Minister for Magic or Prime Minister weren't the goal. Cyrus sought absolute authoritarian power. Where Dumbledore feared, he could only imagine the danger of a dictator ruling both worlds. And you, Dumbledore asked Grindelwald, what will you do? I don't want to do anything, Grindelwald said, sincere. I sided with Voldemort once to eliminate Cyrus because of a prophecy about your death. But that prophecy seems broken. I have no need to oppose Cyrus now. He shrugged. As for the statute of secrecy, he scoffed, a bitter laugh. He seemed to mock the younger self who had once been so certain. I believed I acted for a dream you set me, Grindelwald said. For the greater good, I threw myself in. I forgot that at the start I wasn't so consumed. What he had obsessed over, what he regretted most, were the 2 months of infatuation in Godric's Hollow. Nothing else had outweighed them. It was already night when Cyrus returned from the underground cave off the Room of Requirement. Hogwarts was quiet. Nothing here had changed much in 1,000 years. The silhouette of the castle, the echoes of Tom Riddle's memories, even Cyrus's own recollection of those night excursions with Ginny a few years back, all of it felt the same. The branches of the trees swayed in the wind and still looked like winged beasts against the sky. At this hour, most students were asleep. As Cyrus left the library alone, he ran into Filch. The squib's face went white with surprise and fear the moment he saw him, and Madame Norris arched her back and gave a shrill mew. The old wounds from that attack years ago were clearly still raw. Filch kept his wits about him, though. After a stiff, respectful greeting, he hurried away as if fleeing. Cyrus felt a pang of guilt. He had always liked cats, and he had a whole set of magizoological creatures in his portable trunk now. Perhaps Madame Norris would like some company. A soft light appeared at the end of the dark corridor, like a silver moon sliding open a window and spilling in a veil. Cyrus turned and saw a silver phoenix flutter down. Dumbledore's Patronus. It landed and then seemed to speak. Come to the astronomy tower. I have something to discuss with you. That was the very place Cyrus had wanted to talk about the Room of Requirement. Hogwarts had several towers. 2 served as dormitories for Gryffindor and Ravenclaw, a third was an owl's roost, and a 4th held the divination classroom. These 4 rose at the castle's corners. The central tower, the tallest, housed the astronomy classroom, and the Goblet of Fire had been kept there during the Triwizard Tournament. At this hour, the lesson was long over. When Cyrus climbed the tower, he found Dumbledore standing by the bay window. Circular instruments for stargazing clustered about him, and the Goblet of Fire sat nearby, its blue flame guttering faintly. Under that glow, Dumbledore's profile looked half lost in shadow. It's been a while, Cyrus said. You still haven't put the goblet away? There's nothing wrong with leaving it here, Dumbledore replied. He turned from the starry night and fixed Cyrus with a steady look. I remember, None of us ever really found where the goblet wanted to go, did we? That competition was never resolved. Strictly speaking, he was right. After Voldemort's death, the contest had been moot. Everyone celebrated the end of the Dark Lord. Who cared about an abandoned tournament? Besides, Cyrus had defeated Voldemort. He didn't need any validation from a goblet. He was, by his own reckoning, the uncrowned king. Dumbledore's voice took on another tone. I will officially resign as president of the International Confederation of Wizards in 2 months. Babajide will act as interim president until the next election. He paused, then added, but there is something else I need to talk to you about. Cyrus shook his head gently. It's about the Room of Requirement, he said. You found a clue? Dumbledore asked. He knew something had occurred in the room recently. Ancient magic had been at work, and he had entrusted parts of the matter to Cyrus. The headmaster watched Cyrus's serious expression and braced himself for bad news. Voldemort's body is gone. For a moment it seemed Dumbledore's heart stuttered. Cyrus had burned Voldemort's physical form in the Chamber of Secrets, but the Dark Lord had more than one vessel. The body he had fashioned from his father's bone, a servant's flesh, and Harry's blood had been buried under falling rock in the underground cave after Cyrus defeated him. That body was now missing. Is it Voldemort again? Dumbledore asked, shoulders sagging as wariness washed over him. How many times would the wizard have to be destroyed before he stayed destroyed? Cyrus shook his head. If it were Voldemort, it wouldn't worry me much. He exhausted his options long ago. I don't think it's him. Up to the resurrection, in the Department of Mysteries, Voldemort had burned away every trick. Even if he somehow persisted, he was little more now than a spent shadow. The true danger lay elsewhere, someone or something with powers beyond what they'd seen so far. We don't yet know that person's real aim, Cyrus said, but whoever took the body has serious power, far beyond Voldemort's. He can hide his face and move like a god. Dumbledore nodded. There was little firm information to go on, and they could only watch and prepare. He returned to another pressing subject. More and more wizards are aware of your power, he said. You've become a blazing torch, the sun to many. They will worship you, follow you. Everything you do will set an example. Your decisions will have weight. You must consider them carefully. He spoke from experience. Dumbledore knew what it meant to be trusted by others and how dangerous that trust could be. As Cyrus's reputation spread, more would look to him for leadership. Some would demand he break the statute of secrecy. Others would push harsher policies toward Muggles. Conflict could grow. Cyrus smiled. Are you worried about conflict? We all know it's inevitable, Dumbledore said. Wizards have been hidden and suppressed for so long, Muggles will not accept the sudden appearance of a group that claims superiority. And Muggles, though without magic, change quickly and fight hard. They are like lions that have ruled the savannah. A new pack of tigers won't take that lying down. If wizards announce themselves on their terms, it will cost lives. What concerns you most? Cyrus asked. Dumbledore held Cyrus's gaze, looking for the answer beneath it. Which side will you be on? He asked finally. You came out of Voldemort's arrogant soul, but you are not arrogant like him. You don't despise Muggles. You even value their wisdom. You treat life evenly. Yet your strength, combined with people like Grindelwald, could be overwhelming. If you declare for one side, the other will suffer. Cyrus's reply was simple. Why must I choose? I can be a balance. You will find that difficult, Dumbledore warned. No one is perfectly fair. Once people see you as their leader, you will inevitably be influenced by them. When two groups' interests collide, one will be harmed. So which is it to be, wizards first or something else? Dumbledore was pointing to Muggles. Most of them knew nothing of the magical world and assumed they owned the earth. If wizards revealed themselves, hostility was likely. Many wizards, too, would be contemptuous of Muggles. Cyrus understood that. He had a plan. I'm already preparing to solve that problem, he said. Dumbledore's eyes lit with curiosity. For wizards, we must break down prejudice. Muggles lack magic, yes, but not talent or wisdom. Arthur Weasley sees that. He understands Muggle ingenuity better than most. But the statute of secrecy keeps even him from truly knowing the Muggle world. If wizards studied Muggles properly, they'd see the vast ingenuity that goes into Muggle life. We should update Muggle studies. Dumbledore nodded. Cyrus continued, We should also prepare muggles for our existence, gradually, not by forcing the statute open all at once. That won't be easy, Dumbledore said. I think it will be, Cyrus replied. Times are changing. Muggles are more tolerant. The world is more diverse. We don't need to rip the veil away. We can reveal ourselves slowly. How would you do that? Dumbledore asked. By telling stories in the right way, Cyrus said, amusement in his voice. I found a capable assistant recently. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. Gilderoy Lockhart? He said, surprised. He caused trouble and lost his memory. When I treated Neville's parents, I was able to help Lockhart as well, Cyrus said. He's not very powerful, but he has a flair for presentation. He can tell the magic world's stories to muggles in a form they'll accept. Dumbledore frowned. Cyrus grinned. Don't worry. Gilderoy will write a book called Harry Potter. It will sweep the globe. People will learn about magic and long to receive their own Hogwarts letters. The idea was strange and unprecedented, and it made Dumbledore think of Petunia Evans, Lily's sister, the muggle who refused to believe. Cyrus's point was gentler. Muggles weren't those who lacked magic, but those who didn't believe in it. He stepped to the goblet of fire. Its cold flames reflected in his eyes like distant stars. If everyone believes in magic, he said softly, then there will be no more muggles in this world. 253. Tower struck by lightning. Albus Dumbledore has resigned from his position as principal of the International Confederation of Wizards, with all duties temporarily assumed by Vice Principal Babajide Akínbádé. Early that morning, the Daily Prophet delivered the sensational news to every witch and wizard. Hagrid, having just returned from the giant tribe, read the headline aloud in disbelief. The oversized paper somehow made pocket-sized in his broad hands. Unbelievable, he muttered. If Dumbledore's resigned, who else could do the job properly? Cyrus, of course, someone answered. Harry and a few others had been invited to visit. They all looked at Hagrid with concern. He wasn't in great shape, scarred, his face bruised in places. Are you all right, Hagrid? Hermione asked. I'm fine, he replied, setting the paper down and picking up a chunk of bloody meat with his huge, rough hand. He pressed it against his cheek as if it would ease the ache. Dragon meat'll put me right. I'm built tougher than most. These are nothing. But Cyrus, he's the only one besides Dumbledore I'd trust. Hagrid nodded vigorously, his knotted beard bristling like a fan. Still, it won't be easy. A lot of people won't back him, he continued. It's no surprise, really. He wants to break the Confederation's statute of secrecy. Cyrus was the one Hagrid admired most after Dumbledore. Cyrus had introduced him to Newt and had saved Harry's life more than once. He had also defeated Lord Voldemort. Hagrid respected him deeply. Who else could he imagine as leader of the International Confederation? But internationally, not everyone acknowledged Voldemort's threat the way Hagrid did. To many, Grindelwald remained the greater figure, remembered almost reverently. Power alone could be fought and defeated, they argued, but Grindelwald had controlled minds. Cyrus had defeated Grindelwald too, which only made governments warier of him. He was too powerful, too exceptional. He might follow the same path as Grindelwald. 50 years ago, Dumbledore had been there as a check. Now even Dumbledore might not be enough against someone like Cyrus. I tell you, he really shouldn't be thinking about breaking the statute of secrecy, Hagrid said. He couldn't support Cyrus on that point. As a half-giant, he seemed rough on the outside but was unusually sensitive inside. He knew what it felt like to be an outsider. Madame Maxime, Lupin, once their bloodlines were known, they'd not easily survive in wizarding society. Even when people acknowledged that werewolves only lost control at the full moon, even if there was wolfsbane and evidence that half-giants could be kind, most people would still reject outsiders. If wizards were like that, how would muggles react? If secrecy were broken, wizards would be exposed. Their magic and wands would become claws. Maybe coexistence was possible, but why would muggles risk trusting that wizards would always be benevolent? Harry wanted to defend Cyrus. He imagined the benefits. If the statute were lifted, he could use magic in the muggle world. Maybe conjure a small jinx or two to torment Dudley instead of pretending to wave his wand twice. But Hagrid couldn't see it that way. To him, everything was fine the way it was. Why invite trouble? This'll only bring him grief, Hagrid said. Many won't want him in office. They'll write to Dumbledore or even come here, begging him to take his place again. He wasn't wrong. Since Dumbledore's announcement, hundreds of owls had hammered at the window of the principal's office every day. The glass had to be restored by spell more than once. For each letter, Dumbledore read carefully. Many came from old friends, pleading with him to return. Still, he kept replying, writing with a steady hand of trust in Cyrus. He had never given such faith to anyone before. Perhaps Cyrus had convinced him. Perhaps Dumbledore simply wanted to let go. The entire wizarding world was too much for one man to carry. He was wise and powerful and loved those in the magical community who deserved love. But elders must let go and let the next generation take charge. Cyrus was not Voldemort. Though he wanted to break the statute, his intent was to unite two worlds under order, not to create chaos and domination. "Perhaps I should have let go long ago," Dumbledore wrote in one letter. "Let the world develop on its own and see what it becomes. It might not be so bad." When he finished the last reply, he stretched his stiff hands and rose. Late night had crept in. He looked past the window to the dark grounds and then at the wand on the desk, the Elder Wand. In the last battle, he had given it to Harry. Cyrus had briefly wielded it, and in the end, neither had desired to keep its power. Still, Dumbledore found he couldn't entirely let go. Like Grindelwald, hoarding remnants of a magic legacy, he'd always held a fallback. He laughed, a self-mocking sound. Perhaps he didn't need it anymore. Once his life ended, he thought, the Elder Wand's sway would end with him unless someone bested him. He left the principal's office not quite empty-handed. In his pocket lay the resurrection stone. He did not intend to truly bring anyone back, only to see Ariana once more. He wanted a private place where such small, childish desires would not be discovered. He could have used his office, but it felt too small. His poor sister had never known the world beyond the house where she'd been kept. He wanted to give her a wider view. Dumbledore walked slowly through dim corridors, and at one point, past Fred and George sneaking about after hours. He winked at them and pressed a finger to his lips. He didn't realize how he'd ended up on the astronomy tower. Perhaps he'd come because it was the nearest place to the stars, where the greatest expanse of the world could be seen at once. The great circular instruments glinted like planetary rings. He turned the resurrection stone in his hand 3 times beneath the pale glow spilling from the goblet of fire. Footsteps seemed to come from the darkness. A small shadow moved toward him. She was thin, her cheeks hollow, and her eyes full of pain and fear, but there was also a curious cheerfulness and bravery about her. She was not half his height. The floral dress she'd once worn had faded into translucence, rendering her entirely gray. Dumbledore opened his mouth, trembling, unable to find sound. Ariana spoke first. "Hi, Albus." A girl of no more than 10 calling the gray-haired man brother felt like an impossibility, like a dream. "You remember me?" Dumbledore asked, forcing a smile, though tears brimmed in his eyes. "I've always been watching you all," Ariana said. "You should go and see Aberforth." When young, Dumbledore had sometimes visited his older, less educated, but more practical brother during holidays. But after 1945, when Grindelwald had harmed someone in their family, Aberforth's son, the brothers scarcely met at all. To fight Voldemort, Dumbledore had concealed ties that might become a weakness. Over the years, not meeting had become a habit. He told himself he feared Aberforth wouldn't welcome him. He knew people thought him radiant and saintly, but Aberforth knew the darker parts of him. He feared not a punch that could flatten his nose, but Aberforth ripping open his wounds, tearing away his modesty to show his selfishness. He had been a man who had once abandoned his family, who, in the mirror of Erised, sometimes found himself embracing Grindelwald. He felt he deserved to remain alone at Hogwarts, gathering books while the rest of life passed him by. They stood in silence for a while beneath the stars. Dumbledore walked to the tower's edge, not noticing at first that Ariana's apparition seemed to be flickering. The resurrection stone's link to the dead wavered. Her form began to distort, and worry made her face shrink. From the shadow of the dark tower, another tall shape moved closer. Ariana's expression shifted to terror. She tried to warn him, but could not. Dumbledore asked the question that had rankled him for decades. "Ariana, do you remember?" he began without turning, voice catching. Do you remember whose spell struck you back then? That question had haunted him for nearly a century. He had once feared he himself had caused her death, and now, in his selfishness, hoped that was the case. If he was to blame, then Aberforth and Grindelwald would be innocent. He would accept all the blame. No reply came. His heart thudded. He turned. Ariana stood before the goblet of fire, the light passing through her making her seem less than real. She looked at him with sad, almost pitying eyes. Then another figure overlapping Ariana's shadow coalesced. A gray-robed shape moved within her. Dumbledore's breath caught. "Ariana!" He lunged, trying to grab her, but she dissolved like sand. The other figure became clearer. Dumbledore's eyes widened. "Cyrus?" The man who resembled Cyrus shook his head, disdain in his movement. "I am not Cyrus," he said. "You may call me Death, Albus Dumbledore." He produced the Elder Wand from nowhere and aimed it at Dumbledore's heart. The wand discharged in a blinding flash. Boom! In an instant, a tremendous bolt of lightning struck the gray tower. Grindelwald woke from the nightmare in a panic. He was soaked with cold sweat, his face drained of color, and every whisker on his face seemed weighted with dread. "Death," he whispered. That was death. It wasn't the first time he'd dreamt of Dumbledore's death. At first, when the Goblet of Fire had shone and the Triwizard Tournament had loomed, Grindelwald had convinced himself that any prophecy of Dumbledore's death would have to come then. When the tournament ended, he had breathed easier. Certain fate had been averted. But now the dream returned, and this time every detail was so vivid it felt less like a warning about the future and more like a report from the present. "Albus!" A bolt of cold ran through him. His limbs went numb, and then, as if on reflex, he was on his feet. What if it wasn't a dream? What if it was happening now? Grindelwald snatched up the most presentable clothes he could conjure as he rushed out, casting apparition after apparition until he hurtled from Durmstrang toward Hogwarts. He came out of the last distorted space, reeling, hair disheveled, almost stumbling, more like an inexperienced caster than a master. His head buzzed from the strain, thoughts were sluggish and disordered. He had only one need, to see Dumbledore. He arrived sooner than he dared hope. Before he could reach the castle, a flash of lightning leapt across the tower, and as if the world slowed, he saw Dumbledore struck. The headmaster fell from the heights like a dead gray cloud. Time stretched taut. Each frame of the descent lingered. Grindelwald stood rooted, watching the fall as if seeing it slowed to a crawl. There was no wind. Everything felt viscous and unreal. Above the tower, on the parapet, a figure with golden hair like Cyrus's stood, Elder Wand in hand. His golden eyes were cold and unmoved, less like a familiar sun and more like something that swallowed light. Grindelwald felt a sudden chill. If the Cyrus he knew had been a bright sun, this thing was a black sun. It gave nothing back. It absorbed warmth and left only frost. The flame of rage in Grindelwald's chest went out as if doused by a basin of ice. For the first time he understood how vast the gulf between him and that figure was. No, he told himself, this was not Cyrus. That was death. The legend made flesh had reclaimed a wand, and the magic spilling from him was so vast it made the air hard to breathe. If death had returned to power, who in the world could challenge him? For a sliver of hope, Grindelwald imagined the only one who might stand against death and perhaps pull Dumbledore back from the void, Cyrus. But the false Cyrus on the tower vanished as suddenly as he'd appeared. Grindelwald watched Dumbledore fall and fall again. Those 8 floors were an endless, bottomless pit. Despair stretched and tangled in his chest until, with a sickening crack, Dumbledore's body hit the ground. The world snapped back into motion, color bled back into Grindelwald's vision, and the castle filled with sound. Sobs, shouts, a tide of moving bodies. For a long moment, the people surging around the fallen headmaster were little more than bent, puppet-like shapes to him. Only gradually did their faces resolve. Grief, fury, disbelief. He realized, with a chill, that it was morning. He had stood there for hours. Dew had crept into his collar. Dumbledore's body was rigid, his face dark with the signs of death. Someone, Grindelwald didn't know who, had closed his eyes. Professor McGonagall was collapsed over him, nearly fainting. As the scene steadied, Grindelwald noticed the crowd was not merely stunned. They were grieving, and many were furious. His own mind still swam, unable to fully grasp why he himself was standing there. why the floor beneath Dumbledore had gone dark with blood. Sunlight caught the dew on his clothes, but offered no warmth. Its glare felt like cold iron. Grindelwald. Harry burst through the gathered bodies, furious and raw. He grabbed Grindelwald by the collar like a cornered animal. "Who did it?" he demanded. Hermione and Ron barreled up behind him, grabbing Harry's arms. "Calm down, Harry," Ron said, but Harry shook them off. "I can't calm down. He knows who did it." All eyes swung to Grindelwald. No one spoke. The accusation hung in the air. There were only a few people in the world capable of such an act. Really, two names came to mind: Grindelwald and Cyrus. Grindelwald had been here before the first students found the body in the early morning. He'd been standing by Dumbledore while the castle filled. He was the first on the scene. The suspicion that followed was instantaneous. "Was it Cyrus?" Itomen began, but a portrait interrupted, leaping out of its frame with typical bluster. Sir Cadogan, in his battered armor, waved a long spear and shouted, "Last night I was on patrol, and I saw." "Sir Cadogan," McGonagall snapped, her eyes rimmed red. "If you say another word, I will hang you by your heels." Cadogan lowered his voice, but kept ranting until Ginny, furious, yanked him from the wall, threw him to the floor, and gave him 2 hefty kicks. "Cyrus couldn't possibly do this," Ginny cried. Many at Hogwarts agreed with her. The deans, led by McGonagall, chose to trust Cyrus, if only because they had fought beside him and knew the bond between Cyrus and Dumbledore was not a bitter one. Not everyone was convinced. "Maybe he wanted Dumbledore's post," someone muttered. "Mike, are you stupid?" Hermione snapped and punched the student for voicing it. "Dumbledore resigned his position as president. There is nothing for Cyrus to gain." Even in defending Cyrus, Hermione argued calmly and logically. "Maybe it's a conspiracy," the other student insisted, unwilling to back down. "Please be quiet," McGonagall begged, a broken plea. She was hollow with grief. Albus had done so much for the magical world. Now he was gone, his killer unknown, and the students argued as if the man at the center of it could be reduced to a political pawn. The sorrow around her was enormous. She had been Dumbledore's student and his closest friend. She knew the weight of his past because he had trusted her with it. For decades, they had been companions, two lonely people leaning on each other through a cruel fate. Now that companion was gone. "Grindelwald," she said again, voice trembling, the sound of age and cold in her words. "You must have seen something. You were here. Who was it? I can't believe you, or Cyrus." The image Grindelwald could not purge floated up before him, the golden hair, the cold, the face that was Cyrus's and not Cyrus's at all. He answered in a small voice, the name falling from him like a stone into still water. It was Death. Death? Cyrus stood in traditional wizarding robes, a little bulkier than usual for the formal gathering. Today was no ordinary day. Hogwarts swelled with visitors, more people than even during the Triwizard Tournament, and many of them were familiar faces in the wizarding world. They looked lost as they tried to reconcile the news that the kind, complicated Albus Dumbledore was dead. McGonagall presided over the memorial. Cyrus saw Grindelwald huddled at the edge of the crowd, refusing to come forward. Ginny and Hermione had already told him what they'd seen. A figure claiming to be Death, wearing Cyrus's face, had killed Dumbledore and taken the Elder Wand. Hermione affirmed it with a solemn nod. Cyrus felt a strange mix of emotions, less fury than a kind of absurd incredulity. Once, he had worn Lord Voldemort's face and been mistaken for the Dark Lord. Now an imposter had taken his face to kill the man he loved. It was almost ridiculous. If the world prized a handsome face, even the gods felt compelled to imitate it. He couldn't shake a different thought, though. The body of Lord Voldemort that had been missing from the Room of Requirement, had Death taken it? If the god had restored Voldemort's body to serve as a vessel and sent it out into the world, who knew what uses he might find for it? Why kill Dumbledore? As Cyrus turned that over, he heard Grindelwald's worn voice close by. "Because Albus Dumbledore had a noble soul," Grindelwald said, as if that answered everything. He stood a little apart, hollow-eyed, and recounted what he'd seen on the tower. The lightning, the fall, the figure with Cyrus's face. He spoke as one who had been unwilling to join the arguments until this moment, and now sought out Cyrus. Cyrus understood the half-truth in Grindelwald's explanation. Dumbledore had, in his own way, become noble, not born to it. but forged by suffering and choice. Yet Cyrus could not believe that death's aim was merely to claim a single noble soul. A god who takes the name Death rarely concerns himself only with souls. Having taken Dumbledore's life and the Elder Wand, where would such a being go next? What grander designs might he have? There was no time to answer. McGonagall, grief flattening her voice, moved forward to speak. Around her, the Confederation's envoys, French wizards recently freed from Voldemort's sway, and many professors stood in solemn attendance. Madame Maxime cut an imposing figure among them, her sorrow plain. Snape's hair looked less greasy than usual. Sprout wore clean, proper clothes for the first time in memory. Even Filch had scraped on an old suit. A phoenix circled the castle, its cry rising and falling as the bright morning sun streamed over the grounds. Chapter 255. An innocent person should not seek evidence for something he did not do. Albus Dumbledore's death left a strange, tangled feeling in many people. On one hand, grief spread through the wizarding world. Even those who had never shown much respect for him seemed shaken. Harry watched Cornelius Fudge deliver a solemn eulogy at Dumbledore's white marble tomb, speaking of the loss of a great wizard. But Fudge was hardly the most sincere mourner. Lucius Malfoy showed up and stood as if he had been an old friend. He was only the most obvious example among the many who came to pay their respects. How many of them had once mocked Dumbledore, called him foolish? That made Harry angry. He felt they did not deserve to stand there in front of Albus Dumbledore. "Harry," Mr. Cyrus said to comfort him, "people's judgments of others often become clearer after they're gone. As long as someone is alive, they're bound to make enemies. Of course, not all of them are truly sincere," he added. The adult world was not as simple as Harry wanted it to be. People were talented at putting on shows and wearing masks. If it served them, they would act as if they were close. After a famous person's death, it was as if the whole world suddenly claimed to have been his friend. The rest of the people listened to the polished stories and shed their sentimental tears. On the other hand, life went on. Hogwarts didn't collapse because Dumbledore was gone. Classes continued, though Professor McGonagall often had red-rimmed eyes while teaching, and final exams still had to be taken. The crowd of mourners thinned, the castle quieted, and oddly, the normally gloomy weather at Hogwarts turned bright and sunny as if the world refused to stay sorrowful. Harry felt this was wrong, but it was the reality. After the memorial flowers faded, the cold white marble of the tomb made him sad in a new way. The funeral had felt like a performance to him. People who had opposed Dumbledore putting on a show of grief, using his name to raise themselves. In the end, the marble grew cold again. Only Grindelwald stayed by the tomb day and night. Once immaculately dressed, his trench coats sharper than many Muggles' suits, he now looked like a man aged overnight. His hair was disheveled, his beard overgrown, the coat unwashed. He leaned against the tomb as if all his bones had been removed, muttering indistinctly. Many whispered that he had gone mad. One evening, unable to sleep, Harry slipped out of the castle under a disillusionment charm and wandered toward the tomb. Perhaps it was late, and tiredness played tricks on him. He saw an old man who could have been Dumbledore's reflection. Same eyebrows, the same eyes, only a shorter beard. He almost called out, "Professor Dumbledore." He did call out, and in that instant the figure vanished. Later, Ron told him that was probably the barkeeper from the Hog's Head. The barkeeper? Harry blinked, stunned. The Hog's Head barkeeper? I swear I saw Dumbledore. You did, Ron said with a sigh. His name's Aberforth Dumbledore. He's Albus's brother. Of course he looks like him. Dumbledore has a brother? Harry found it hard to believe. Why didn't I see him at the funeral? News of Dumbledore's death had spread everywhere, and countless people had come to pay respects. Harry had been numb watching all the tear-streaked faces. He was certain he hadn't seen Aberforth among them. They didn't have a good relationship, Ron added. Dad told me. Aberforth hated Albus. When my dad went to tell him about the professor's death, Aberforth slammed the door so hard it nearly hit him. He wasn't grieving. He said Albus deserved it for getting mixed up with people like Grindelwald. He called it retribution. Ron went on. Aberforth had even said he was going to celebrate and buy drinks for everyone at the Hog's Head that day. Harry felt a fresh sting of injustice. Dumbledore had done so much for the wizarding world, and yet after his death, he was left with hypocrisy and desertion, while even members of his family cursed him. A small, private memory returned. Dumbledore once told Harry that every Christmas he received endless books, and people assumed a great wizard must love books. But Dumbledore had said he preferred wool socks. That, Harry thought, was family. "I should have given him a pair of wool socks," Harry whispered, squatting on the grass and burying his face in his knees. From there, he could see sunlight glancing off the distant white tomb. He realized he had never given Dumbledore a gift. He'd been waiting for others to be generous and had forgotten he could offer a little kindness himself. Ron and Hermione put hands on Harry's shoulders without speaking. Mr. Cyrus did not stay long at Hogwarts. After Dumbledore's death, Babajide had taken over the International Confederation of Wizards. Having seen Mr. Cyrus's power firsthand, the new leader naturally knew it would be unwise to provoke him lightly. Not everyone was so cautious, though. Some grudged Mr. Cyrus's ideas about the Confederation's secrecy and clung to old statutes. He disagreed but was willing to respect them. Worse, some people accused Mr. Cyrus of killing Dumbledore. "Your accusation is absurd, Mr. Nuno Bush," Babajide said, frowning. The exchange took place in the Confederation headquarters courtroom, and Mr. Cyrus stood in the defendant's dock, dressed in a suit and calm as ever. No one defended him. He did not need defending. Wizard trials might look like Muggle courts, but they worked very differently. The accusation was ludicrous and could not stand from the start. Mr. Cyrus did not need to prove his innocence. Attending the hearing gave him attention enough. If the rumor that he had killed the greatest wizard spread, who would not notice? Mr. Nuno Bush, however, did not seem the type to give up. "My accusation is not absurd, Mr. Babajide," he said seriously. "On the contrary, I find Grindelwald's defense of Mr. Cyrus absurd. There is no death," he went on, gesturing at the assembled jurors, well-known figures from across the wizarding world. "That's a children's tale. Surely none of you would take it seriously." Bulstrode, once a Death Eater and now a high-ranking Makusa official, sneered. He still carried authority. "Muggles don't always take us seriously either," he said, "but wizards are real, and the Deathly Hallows may be real too. 50 years ago, Grindelwald had one of them, which is why he could sweep across the world." He implied that Grindelwald's early triumphs were thanks to the Elder Wand. If governments preferred to avoid admitting they had been bested by a wizard rather than by a legendary object, such an explanation would be convenient. Bulstrode continued, warm for the grander story. Dumbledore defeated him. The Elder Wand then passed to Dumbledore. The existence of the Hallows suggests that death might be more than a myth. Nuno Bush scowled, ready to mock him, but Bulstrode went on in a more measured tone. Not necessarily a deity, perhaps, but some extraordinarily powerful wizard, someone capable of forging terrifying artifacts and surviving through unknown means. One who could make a resurrection stone might also be capable of producing a philosopher's stone. Babajide listened and then raised the stakes. If, as Mr. Bulstrode suggests, such a wizard exists, could he now be disguised as Mr. Cyrus? Could he have murdered Dumbledore? The implication went further. He even whispered that this figure might be Lord Voldemort. Voldemort's shadow still loomed large. Scarcely anyone underestimated the fear he had cast, even if Mr. Cyrus had once. Mr. Cyrus stood quietly in the dock through the arguments, almost indifferent to the ebb and flow of accusations. He did not look like a man under trial so much as an observer, as if he were watching others receive their verdicts. The heated speeches felt distant to him. He wondered what death wanted. If this entity had killed Dumbledore for his noble soul, he could understand the symbolism. But why take Voldemort's body or appearance? Perhaps the goal was chaos, to stir wizards into a war among themselves or against Muggles, and then to reap the harvest. The hearing reached its end. "Your accusation is not sufficient, Mr. Nuno Bush," Babajide declared and struck his gavel. "If you accuse Mr. Cyrus, produce concrete evidence. Do not rely on conjecture." Nuno Bush protested, stubborn. "Mr. Cyrus can't prove his innocence." "In dubio pro reo," Babajide said gravely. "An innocent person does not have to provide evidence for something he did not do." Those words effectively ended the trial. Babajide's pragmatic, old-fashioned style differed from Dumbledore's. Dumbledore might have tried to defend himself into traps of self-justification, Babajide closed down such gambits with legal finality. Court dismissed. The gavel fell, and those present began to stand to leave. Before they could, a white blur slammed through a window and stumbled into the courtroom. "Hedwig?" Mr. Cyrus said, startled, and snatched the snowy owl out of the air. "Hedwig, why are you here?" Cyrus caught her before she could collapse, releasing a soft tug of magic to draw the exhausted owl toward him. Hedwig had flown a long way. Her feathers were ruffled, she looked hollow-cheeked, and she seemed to have eaten little in days. Cyrus wondered what urgent thing could have driven her to neglect food to deliver a single letter. He flicked a summoning charm, conjured water and some food for the bird, then took the envelope from her. True to form, it was from Harry. Harry's handwriting was a scrawl, hurried, breathless. He hadn't even written a usual greeting. Cyrus didn't care for courtesies. He opened the letter and read, "Death is seeking his 3 sacrifices. No matter how time bends, he will claim the souls that were meant for him." Together they defeated a powerful foe and earned Death's praise and gifts. The eldest received the invincible Elder Wand. He praised the wand's limitless power, but was ambushed and his life was taken. Cyrus frowned. It sounded like a prophecy, but in content it merely echoed the tale of the 3 brothers. He could have finished the rest from memory. The second brother, arrogant and desperate to humiliate death, demanded power to resurrect the dead. He used it to bring back his lost lover, only to be driven mad by her cold indifference and to end his own life. The third brother kept the invisibility cloak and walked with death until he greeted him as an old friend. Yet Harry's letter continued in a different tone. There was less poetic praise and more a hard hint of inevitability. Death, the letter said, would still take his 3rd sacrifice. And after that, unstoppable death would descend upon the world. Cyrus's chest tightened. He had heard the tale 1,000 times, but this time it felt less like folklore and more like a dossier. 3 sacrifices, not necessarily brothers. Dumbledore had the Elder Wand and had been killed, already 1 taken. Grindelwald and I, the thought arrived unbidden. He will obtain the souls that originally belonged to him, Cyrus repeated in his head. If the story played out in this world, Dumbledore's death would be followed by the fall of Grindelwald. Death would collect them both. And the third, the invisibility cloak protected the 3rd sacrifice, yet he will ultimately be alone, and at the end of his life he will face death's trial once more, the letter read. "No one escapes death's judgment," Cyrus muttered. Was the 3rd sacrifice him? Because of what Cyrus had become, Voldemort hadn't had a long reign of terror after resurrection. Few wizards had died. Cyrus had changed that balance, so it would not be surprising if death turned his gaze on him. Still, "My soul belongs to no one," he sneered inwardly. Death sounded like a weighty figure in a myth, but in truth a being who hid in the dark and tripped people up was hardly worth fearing. If Death wanted a face-to-face duel, Cyrus would be happy to oblige. He folded the letter away and looked up. The courtroom was watching, faces solemn, some edged with worry. It made him smile wryly. When a man's power reached a certain height, even the smallest movement drew scrutiny. You could be silent and still be heard. "Mr. Cyrus, is something wrong?" Babajide asked after a moment of consideration. Cyrus's brief frown had unsettled many. Anyone could write, but few could decide life in the magical world. They could ignore most things, but not him. "Nothing, Mr. Babajide," Cyrus said, smiling. He didn't mean to reveal the prophecy, and thank you for defending me earlier. The old wizard nodded, spirit still bright in his aged face. "I trust Dumbledore's judgment," he said quietly. "Albus trusted you," Cyrus returned. "He would not have worked with you otherwise. Even in death, Dumbledore's name carried weight with those who had lived through his era." Babajide's eyes reddened. "Will you find the murderer?" he asked. "Of course," Cyrus said. "If only for myself, I will find him." One by one, people drifted away. Bella and Cassandra stepped forward but didn't press for details. They believed Cyrus would set things right. Cassandra did mutter, "Should I go kill that Nuno Bush?" Cyrus laughed then, shaking his head. "Why bother? He's pathetic enough without a brain." At Hogwarts, Harry still replayed the night over and over. Trelawney had been in a trance-like state, stumbling from the tower where Dumbledore fell. She moved like a sleepwalker, mumbling incoherently, and then, in the observatory, she had erupted, eyes glowing as if they held a terrible sight. The astronomy professor's students had been pulled from class. Half the school crowded the tower. McGonagall had pushed through to quiet the scene, and Harry and a few others had been lucky enough to hear the prophecy. Trelawney had collapsed afterward and remained in the hospital wing. Madame Pomfrey feared the backlash of such a revelation had left the seer weakened. Because she didn't prophesize about an ordinary person, Madame Pomfrey speculated, but a deity. Trelawney's magic may not be enough to bear that. Pomfrey even suggested Trelawney's fainting might have been a warning from Death himself. The prophet's unconscious state cast a pall over Harry and his friends. Harry wasted no time. He had written immediately to Cyrus. "A prophecy doesn't have to come true," Ginny insisted. "Cyrus absolutely will not die." She spoke with fierce conviction, both faith in Cyrus and an attempt to steady herself. Cyrus had only once been beaten, just after his resurrection, weak and still regaining his power against Dumbledore with the Elder Wand. Since then, he had not lost. Even if death itself was involved, Ginny refused to accept that Cyrus might be an exception. "If Grindelwald and Cyrus join forces, their chances only grow," Hermione said. Her eyes flicked almost involuntarily toward the castle courtyard where Dumbledore's grave lay. Ron snorted. "Oh, please," he said. "Grindelwald's mad. He wanders the castle filthy as a corpse. Do you know how long it's been since he washed?" He was right about Grindelwald's current state. The light had gone from his once beautiful eyes. He looked hollow, as if life had already drained away. Harry and the others couldn't help but think of Severus Snape, whose story was now known to them all, how he had finally seen Lily with the resurrection stone and gained some measure of forgiveness. Snape, too, had been through hell and come out with new, if fragile, life. "Maybe he'll feel better after seeing Professor Dumbledore," Ron said, but Harry shook his head hard. "Have you forgotten the prophecy?" Hermione snapped. "And the fairy tale. If Grindelwald used the resurrection stone to force Dumbledore back, Dumbledore wouldn't need death to take him. He'd go mad first." The idea of a cold, lifeless Dumbledore was almost suffocating. "What worries me most is Cyrus," Harry said suddenly. "I gave him the cloak." Ginny and Hermione both gasped. They couldn't understand why Harry would give Cyrus the invisibility cloak. The prophecy said even the cloak wouldn't save him. "You're putting him in danger," Ginny accused, but Harry shook his head. "Have you never noticed?" he asked. "Sometimes the more you try to prevent a prophecy, the more you push the pieces into place." He thought of Voldemort's first attempt on his life. The Dark Lord had believed he could kill a child and end a threat, yet that very action created a connection that led to his own downfall. Choices could steer fate in unexpected directions. Sometimes accepting a path allowed different outcomes. For a while, no one spoke. Then Ron teased, "You're starting to sound more and more like Dumbledore, Harry." The remark snapped Harry back. He wondered if he was becoming like Dumbledore, but he realized something harder. He wasn't growing wiser. He was growing afraid. Not of his own death. He had faced danger and come back, but of waking to find Cyrus gone, or Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Neville, all the people he had come to rely on. He had never before imagined how it would feel to lose them. Dumbledore's death had taught him that rank and power could not keep anyone safe from death. That death, the force that made the Hallows, the death that had taken Dumbledore, could touch anyone. 257. Changes in the magic world, Ilvermorny. As principal, Cyrus could be accused of neglecting his duties. He was absent from the school most of the time, leaving the day-to-day business to Boot. That was fortunate. Boot had once been principal himself, so the trivialities were familiar and did not burden him. It was also worth noting that a number of students had already graduated. Cassandra was one of them. She now followed Cyrus and had become his capable assistant. In many ways, she outshone Bella. Bella's combat ability was impeccable. No Auror would relish facing her in a duel, but outside of fighting, she was less reliable. Impetuous and temperamental, she behaved only when she was in Cyrus's presence. Cassandra, by contrast, could be blunt, but she handled affairs more competently. Many of the students who left Ilvermorny last year had taken up Cyrus's cause. They formed an organization of their own, calling themselves the Wall Breakers, with the declared aim of tearing down the wall between witches and wizards and muggles. Cassandra was one of its leaders. Popular, gifted, and remembered for her performance in the Triwizard Tournament, she drew crowds. Fisher, another champion, had also joined them. They traveled the wizarding world giving speeches, promoting Cyrus's idea of dismantling the Statute of Secrecy, insisting it would not mean violence. Cyrus, they said, had no intention of subjugating Muggles like Grindelwald had sought to subjugate others. Many people equate Mr. Cyrus with Grindelwald and see our wall breakers as some new Wizengamot, Fisher told dozens of wizards, his voice carrying. Some even foolishly suggest Mr. Cyrus and Grindelwald conspired to murder Dumbledore. He let the accusation hang for a moment and then laughed. Nonsense. In the British ministry, Grindelwald even tried to attack Mr. Cyrus. Of course he lost, Fisher added with a smile, and the crowd shared a relieved ripple of laughter. Then he shifted tone. I'm not here to rehash Mr. Cyrus's power. I'm here to talk about what he wants to do, a great thing, something that will benefit all of us. Persuasion rarely works by force. Fisher guided his listeners instead. We are not Grindelwald. We do not want war. We do not declare any race superior or inferior. Our goal is to break down prejudice. How should wizards and muggles relate? Whether or not to gradually abolish the Statute of Secrecy is not a decision for one person. It is a question for the age to answer. History showed that the relationship between muggles and wizards had shifted repeatedly. Long ago, in some places, muggles worshipped wizards as gods. In the Founders' era, adults largely kept peace, but magical young were sometimes persecuted, and obscurials, born of such ignorance, posed a terrible threat. Then came the witch hunts of the Middle Ages, and eventually wizards chose concealment. That concealment became the Statute of Secrecy. But how do we know if now is the time to lift that statute and expose ourselves to the Muggle world? Someone asked. Fisher's reply was cautious. I won't tell you now is the time. Whether the moment is ripe, you must judge for yourselves. Before Muggles learn of us, we must learn about them. We must see what they have achieved in the centuries since we went quiet, what they've done without magic. You mean Muggle studies? Someone offered. Fisher smiled. Yes, but it's not enough. Those Muggle studies textbooks are centuries old. Maybe you think the wizarding world hasn't changed, that only faces have turned over, that the people from hundreds of years ago would recognize us. For Muggles, everything changes every day. Centuries ago, they traveled by horse. Now they have airplanes and cars. Some say that's trivial. An airplane is no match for a broom, but their planes fly at 10,000 meters where broom riders would struggle to breathe. He let that sink in. Others say it doesn't matter. We have the flu network, portkeys, apparition. Their planes fly high, but they aren't as fast as us. A man in the crowd bristled with pride. That's true, he said, voice full of the smug certainty of wizards who feel unthreatened by Muggle progress. I know a little about what Muggles call technology, but frankly, their tricks can't compare to magic. Fisher didn't take the interruption as rudeness. He simply asked, Then tell me, can you use the flu network to fly into space? Can you use a portkey to bring me soil from the moon? You can't. Fisher's answer was flat. Muggles can. The man flushed with embarrassment and then redoubled his anger. So you're saying Muggles are smarter than us? That they're superior? That we're inferior and should bow to them? His volume rose. Everyone felt the sting of a public slight. Fisher could have lost the room in that moment. Fortune intervened in the form of Cassandra. She stepped forward like a queen, and the crowd's attention shifted to her. I don't think Muggles are smarter than wizards, and I don't think wizards are inferior, she said, voice cool. But you, she fixed the troublemaker with a look, you are the one who looks inferior. The man's face turned deeper red. A few minutes ago, Fisher said we should not declare who is superior or inferior, Cassandra continued. Goblins can smelt mithril, centaurs can divine in ways we don't, trolls resist magic in ways dragons don't. These are things we don't possess. Does anyone here think those beings are nobler than wizards? No one raised a hand. But you, she said to the man, I suspect a troll's head would be better than yours. She left the insult to land and then moved on. There will always be people who shout to be heard. They waste time. Cassandra took the floor and broadened the argument Fisher had begun. For too long, she said, wizards have wondered how goblins forge mithril while goblins covet our wand-making. Neither side shares its secrets because both fear losing what makes them powerful. But now Muggles are showing ingenuity. Half a century ago, they built weapons that could level a city. We can learn from them. The crowd was stunned. Wizards had never considered learning from Muggles in earnest. Grindelwald, in his day, had preached wizard supremacy. He would never have counseled learning from Muggles. For centuries, the term Muggle had been synonymous with ignorance. To ask wizards to learn from Muggles was an affront. Cyrus understood how much resistance he would meet. People see others' faults more readily than their strengths. Being told where you are weak hurts. Cyrus's proposal offered no immediate gain for those set in their ways. In their short-sightedness, many wizards could not imagine any benefit to dismantling the Statute of Secrecy. It was, in their eyes, worse than Lord Voldemort. At least if Voldemort had succeeded, wizards would have been openly dominant and able to enslave Muggles. Cyrus sometimes thought the wizarding world resembled the late Qing Empire. Insular, self-satisfied, assuming the world still revolved around it, while the peoples they had once looked down upon had turned guns and industry into powers of their own. When Muggles discover us and learn magic, the end of wizards as we know them could follow, he told himself. Magic is rare, but it is part of nature. One day Muggles would likely explain it. Fortunately for wizards, that would take time, and time afforded preparation. Cyrus did not expect the older generation to change quickly. They were as stubborn as rotten wood. He aimed instead at the young. At his request, Ilvermorny had added a new subject called Magic and Science. Through this course, the young wizards still in school would learn about the Muggle world. Under the pressure of exams, they would read, study the inventions and discoveries of the past century, and come to understand that Muggle intellect rivaled their own. Forced to do without magic, Muggles had developed methods, biology, engineering, microscopy, that could inspire wizards. Wizards dissected a goat's stomach for bezoars, but few had ever looked at the cells of magical creatures or plants under a microscope. If Muggle methods were applied to magical subjects, the uses of dragon's blood might multiply far beyond the 12 everyone knew. To spread that culture more widely, Cyrus launched a magazine, Magic and Science, and offered prizes through the Wizard Bank. The lure of galleons got people interested. At first, the papers submitted were full of holes and barely readable, but Cyrus didn't mind. He wasn't after perfection, he wanted an atmosphere. With money on the table, wizards set aside some of their arrogance and read about Muggles. The new prizes also created employment prospects for students studying magic science. If the youth came to understand Muggles better, then perhaps, years from now, even without Cyrus, they would see that the Statute of Secrecy needed to go. For the moment, though, the work was slow and fraught. Cyrus had returned to Hogwarts. Standing by the Black Lake, he felt the castle's grief. The students no longer talked openly of Dumbledore's death, but the castle itself mourned the great wizard. McGonagall now held the position of headmistress, and she would, like Boot, be a good leader. Cyrus was not at Hogwarts to see her, however. He found Harry, with Ginny and the others nearby, and said, "Come on, Harry, I'm taking you somewhere." 258. Let's go meet the god of death. Cyrus, what are you doing here? Harry and the others stared. After so many events, Cyrus had become nearly indistinguishable from the other professors at Hogwarts. The castle itself acknowledged him. Professor McGonagall and the rest treated him with great respect. In fact, at the very beginning, McGonagall had even suggested he take the position of headmaster. He had refused. "We thought you'd be very busy right now," Ginny and Hermione said cheerfully. "I am quite busy." Cyrus nodded. "But most things can be left to others. Breaking the Confederation's Statute of Secrecy isn't a 1 or 2 day affair. More importantly, wizards need to understand why it's necessary." "What will happen to Muggles if the statute is broken?" Hermione asked, a worry on her face. Cyrus understood her concern. Hermione was a Muggle-born. Both her parents were Muggles, and she had only learned about magic a few years ago. She worried that ordinary Muggles without magic would be discriminated against if the statute were lifted. The worry wasn't baseless. Hogwarts had its example, Argus Filch. Marked as a squib, even Ron had once mocked him. "They'll envy the power of magic," Cyrus said simply, smiling. "But honestly, it's no different from some people being good at math and others not. There's nothing to condemn. Hermione relaxed visibly. When we graduate, we can help, she said. You'd have to become Minister for Magic first, Cyrus joked. In truth, the current British Minister for Magic didn't matter much to him. The position couldn't decide this issue on its own. Don't worry, time will give us the answers. He sounded confident. So, are you here about death? Harry asked cautiously. Their conversation had been circling that unbearable shadow over London for days. Death felt like a dark cloud that wouldn't lift. They had barely dared ask, worried for bad news. If Grindelwald had steadied himself, you'd have another ally, Harry said. But he's cowardly now. They all looked distastefully toward the mere memory of Grindelwald's current state. He is a coward, Cyrus agreed. He remembered how Grindelwald had fled after Dumbledore's sister's death rather than stand with him. That made Harry's assessment ring true. Cyrus looked at the tramp still lying near Dumbledore's grave and thought of how this man had once swept across Europe. He would not remain broken forever, Cyrus believed. Actually, I came for you, Harry, Cyrus said. Harry blinked in surprise. Ron made an obvious face. He was used to everyone finding Harry first. Ginny and Hermione were a little irritated. Not again, they seemed to think. For me? Harry asked. I thought someone should take you to see it. See what? Godric's Hollow, where your parents used to live and where they're buried. Cyrus said it plainly. Today is their anniversary. The words hit everyone. The last Triwizard Tournament had been in summer. So much had happened since. Harry realized belatedly that it was Halloween. He felt oddly bereft. After everything, seeing his parents' souls, he'd never thought to visit their grave on this day. If Cyrus hadn't told him, he wouldn't have known. Come on, I've already spoken to Minerva. Cyrus took Harry by the sleeve and looked at Ron and the others. Do you want to come? Ron looked tempted, but Hermione gently pulled him back. No need, she said. Let Harry go by himself. She gave Ginny and Ron a small pull away. We'll save you a place at the feast, Harry. They left. Cyrus glanced once more at Dumbledore's grave, bathed in the afterglow, then apparated. Godric's Hollow had changed since Cyrus was last there. For one, it felt livelier. Without Dementors patrolling, the townspeople's moods were brighter. Children from Muggle households ran about in strange costumes for Halloween. By comparison, Harry's wizarding robes looked plain. As they walked, some children even teased Harry that his outfit was out of fashion. Harry found it oddly charming. He hadn't spent a Halloween wandering the Muggle streets in years. The Dursleys would have locked him in. If you want, you can play for a while. It's all right today, Cyrus suggested. Harry shook his head. I'm not that age anymore. There was a touch of weary resignation in his tone. He was in his 5th year now. He truly wasn't a trick-or-treater anymore. Then let's go to the cemetery, Cyrus said. They walked on. A little boy passed them, dressed as a wizard, clutching a magic book with an unclear title and wearing robes with a Gryffindor flair. He carried a short stick of a wand. Harry started. Hogwarts hadn't started recruiting children that young, had it? The boy looked 6 or 7, too young to control inherent magic. A wand in a Muggle crowd could be dangerous. Hey kid, be careful, Harry called, but stopped when the boy turned. The child's face was round, black hair messily fly away, gold-rimmed round glasses perched on his nose, and emerald eyes that caught Harry's. For a moment, Harry felt as if he were looking at himself. The boy saw Harry's robes and leapt with delight. Big brother, you like Harry Potter too? He cried, bouncing. He opened his book without hesitation. Harry read the title, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. The small boy even had a sticker of a lightning bolt on his forehead. It took a little effort to say goodbye. The child ran off, happy as could be. Harry felt strangely unreal. He was used to his name appearing in newspapers and books. Hermione had produced accounts of his defeat of Voldemort the first time they met. But this was different, a child impersonating him, clutching a book about himself. I'd like to know what's in that book, Harry said, uneasy, especially knowing Gilderoy Lockhart had written it. Don't worry, Cyrus smiled. The story was vetted by me. It's guaranteed to be the true Harry Potter. He chuckled. If Harry wanted, they could buy a copy before returning to Hogwarts. Lockhart's tale so far covered only the first part. The Chamber of Secrets plot was still being formed, and Rita Skeeter's knack for sensational publicity would expand its reach. Cyrus didn't plan to deviate from the real story. He intended to give Muggles an authentic Harry Potter. Lockhart and Rita made a perfect team for that. One good at writing, the other at manufacturing scandal. Harry Potter was already popular even before its release. If he weren't living with the Dursleys, Dudley might have been clutching it now. "I'd rather not," Harry said, shaking his head. He pictured Lockhart's florid self-portraits applied to his life and shivered. He didn't like being lionized. They reached the small square in front of the church. In the center stood a war memorial that shifted, becoming an exquisite sculpture as they approached. Harry recognized the figures at once, his mother, his father, and himself. Tears pricked his eyes. He stared until the sculpture shifted back to a plain memorial. They went on to the graveyard behind the church. Harry wasn't surprised, though he'd half expected it. Someone else was already there paying respects. Severus Snape, as always in black, held a bouquet of white daffodils. "Professor Snape," Harry said. Lately the title came more easily. Much of his resentment had softened, even if Snape still mercilessly picked on him in class. "Harry Potter." Snape glanced at Cyrus with a curt nod, then at Harry, and flung the name out slowly. "Seems someone finally remembered there's someone here to be remembered," he said, his tone sarcastic, then prepared to go. Cyrus called after him. "Severus, can you take Harry back to Hogwarts later?" Snapey paused. Harry blurted, "Aren't you taking me back?" "I have other business," Cyrus replied. "I'll wait for him in Lily's room," Snape said coldly and walked away without looking back. Only Harry and Cyrus remained. Harry's curiosity about Cyrus's other business burned. He wanted to ask. Sure, it had something to do with death, but he didn't. They passed row after row of graves. Harry read familiar names and felt a flood of feeling. They paused by a marble stone. Tears welled in Harry's eyes as he read the inscription. He turned to Cyrus. "The last enemy to be defeated is death," he said quietly. "But can death really be defeated? My parents are dead. Professor Dumbledore is dead." His voice dropped. The thought that no one had truly beaten death at last seemed overwhelming. The greatest wizards had died. Voldemort had died despite 7 Horcruxes. Even the creator of the Philosopher's Stone had a fate no one knew. Cyrus's voice was light, oddly cheerful. "Of course someone can defeat death, Harry." Harry looked at him, incredulous. "That someone could be you." "Me?" "You've never been afraid of death," Cyrus said. "Death's power has never terrified you, and you are still alive. He couldn't take your life." Cyrus used a small, definite word, he. "You've already defeated death, in a way. You're the kind of person who can stand up to it. That's why Dumbledore was proud of you." "Life beyond death?" Harry whispered. Cyrus rested a hand on Harry's shoulder. For a long while they stood in silence. The town quieted into night. Finally, Cyrus said softly, "Go find Severus, Harry. Your parents' house is at the end of the village." Harry left, and the graveyard sank into darkness. Cyrus stood with his back chilled by the night air. From behind came footsteps. Cyrus turned and saw Grindelwald not far off, eyes burning with a familiar, deadly fire. "Let's go," Grindelwald said, voice low and dangerous. "Let's go meet that death. Let's go meet death." Grindelwald stood in the graveyard, the countless headstones like a pale forest. 2 of the most powerful wizards in the world walked side by side, ready to fight together. The thing that called itself death would probably meet only death itself. Cyrus moved among the long dead, as if he had already crossed into the beyond to stand at Grindelwald's side. Their silhouettes might have looked slight, but the power they carried was something even gods would reckon with. Cyrus couldn't help a private thought. I hope Dumbledore doesn't get jealous. They left the graveyard together. "You shouldn't have let that child go," Grindelwald said, meaning, of course, Harry. "He's the true master of death, the only one to possess all 3 Deathly Hallows at once, the only one who has returned from death. Death would fear him. He might be the key to victory." "Harry's task is to defeat Voldemort, not to defeat death," Cyrus replied. "He's still a student, a child. He's already done more than enough. We shouldn't saddle him with everything and force him into needless risk." "That's where you, I, and Dumbledore differ," Grindelwald said. He would not care about the child's age, identity, or risk. If victory required sacrifice, he would take it. Dumbledore would nurture the child and ultimately give him the choice. Cyrus had instead chosen to bear the burden himself. Harry may be the master of death, Cyrus said, but our enemy might not be death at all. The thing that had killed Dumbledore had not shown itself since. Still, Cyrus and Grindelwald had guesses. In legend, Death and the Peverell brothers had been inseparable. Godric's Hollow was the homeland of the three and the place their descendants lived on. If the killer of Dumbledore truly was Death, he might return there. They found Godric's Hollow ordinary, peaceful, untouched by some looming shadow. That surprised them. "You're right, he's not Death," Grindelwald sneered. One of his eyes shone in the night, brighter than the moon. Cyrus recognized Grindelwald's magical eye, searching for the imposter. Grindelwald's magic hummed, a terrifying aura forming a barrier around him like a wash of blood-colored flame. He had clearly grafted Morgana's legacy into himself, though not the fragment Cyrus had once lent to Harry, but the power Voldemort had reclaimed from the past. It raised Grindelwald's magic to a level nearly comparable to Cyrus's. The danger was immense. Morgana's legacy was seeded with terrible, corrupting emotions. Only those whose souls were unusually resilient could wield it without being consumed. Cyrus could counteract its side effects because his soul was uncommonly strong. Voldemort could because he had fragmented and devoured his own soul across timelines. Grindelwald had an ordinary soul. With a misstep, Morgana's power could destroy him. Cyrus said nothing. Words would be useless. Grindelwald had already chosen death when Dumbledore died. Revenge was now the sole thing keeping him alive. Death? What was there to fear when one was already willing to be destroyed? The gaze from Grindelwald's enchanted eye unfolded fate like threads, a web that hinted at a shadow of some god, a towering gray-white spire, cliffs of tombstones, darkness striking again, ghosts drifting. The magic receded like a tide. Grindelwald sagged, briefly exhausted, but the killing intent only sharpened. "He's in Azkaban," he said. Cyrus nodded gravely. They vanished together. Only an echo lingered. North of the North Sea sat Azkaban, dark and fathomless, light from the world unable to reach it. Ink-thick clouds clung to the sky. Dementors drifted like ghosts, but this time they were clustered together, not in chaotic flight, but gathered, as if under the command of a monstrous presence. One did not have to deduce who controlled them. Azkaban in early November bit with cold. Sea spray turned to ice. But cold meant nothing to Cyrus and Grindelwald. Their bodies were beyond such things. Grindelwald observed the Dementor's unusual behavior and the figure atop the tower who had sacrificed all the prisoners. The thing, this death, had taken the lives of every soul in Azkaban. He had noticed them. He lifted the Elder Wand without speaking a spell and sounded an attack horn. In an instant, the sky darkened with Dementors swarming down like locusts. The cold froze the sea. Cyrus and Grindelwald stood as lone figures in an Arctic storm. The wind cut like knives, shredding the reefs. "We'll have to clear these first," Cyrus said. They exchanged a look, and the next moment, Cyrus became a golden thunderbird. Its cry split the air, and lightning leapt from its wings, golden bolts that incinerated whole bands of Dementors. Cyrus had long mastered ancient magic. His silver Patronus combined with his Imago Magus made him devastating against creatures born of darkness. Grindelwald answered in kind. Morgana's legacy fed on dark emotion. Dementors were embodiments of the deepest despair. Instead of a Patronus, Grindelwald loosed a black-red demonic dragon, a thing birthed from misery itself. It lunged, seized Dementors, and fed on them, devouring despair with an ever deeper despair. The sight was monstrous. Faceless visages writhed across its hide, skeletal white arms reached from its wings like corpses trapped in quicksand. If Grindelwald lost control, the dragon's corruption would turn him inside out, annihilating his soul. He was knowingly risking everything to kill the murderer. The black dragon and golden thunderbird circled the bone-cast tower. On its battlements stood the wielder of the Elder Wand, a figure that, at first glance, resembled Cyrus. Time, though, had ravaged him. Cheeks hollowed, spine curved, as if centuries had stolen vitality. "Welcome, my sacrifices," he crooned, delighted to see them. "You and you, your souls belong to me." He spread his arms and shouted, "To the great death. And your life belongs to me." Grindelwald snapped. The battle broke. Neither Cyrus nor Grindelwald wasted words. If their foe was not death, there was nothing to say. If he truly was death, words were useless. Spells flew. Deadly, enormous spells, every movement potentially fatal. Cyrus's lightning pierced the frozen sea. He snapped back into human form. His wand, a length of snake wood, screamed under constant use. He wintered the shore with fire so fierce it steamed and turned to boiling rain. Grindelwald drew the dragon back into himself because his old body could not sustain the strain. Only that magic kept him standing. The dragon had eaten so many dementors it could not digest them, faceless things clawing at its skin, white hands emerging like a mass of corpses seeking escape. Death had only the Elder Wand and cackling defiance. Even so, he held them at bay. He lifted an arm, and from the ground a towering white spire shot up like a thrown spear toward them. Diffindo! Grindelwald did not speak the incantation. A look, and the white tower shattered into dust the moment it struck. Azkaban's tower was destroyed. Cyrus thrust his wand into the bedrock. The island seemed to breathe and rise like a living thing, attempting to drag the tiny impostor into an abyss of its making. The wielder of the Elder Wand touched the island with ease, and its animation died. The island split into black fragments and sank beneath the waves. Space called Azkaban ceased to exist. The thing in the air looked down at Cyrus and Grindelwald. "Pitiful, do you think you can oppose me?" he said, pity in his gaze. "Why wouldn't we?" Cyrus answered, magic coiling around him as he rose to meet the figure. "You call yourself Death? To me, you're nothing." Cyrus's voice dripped contempt. "You borrow the name of Death, but your actions are pathetic." Killing Dumbledore and taking the Elder Wand had been a coward's move. Cyrus continued, proof that the man had no faith in his own power. If Death himself existed, would he bother with such trinkets? Would a god need a wand? "You think yourself strong, but you're hollow," Cyrus said. "You're afraid of being overthrown. And you think that by wearing the name of Death and occupying Lord Voldemort's body, I wouldn't see through you?" Cyrus finished. The so-called Death froze. Surprise, confusion, and a flash of something else crossed his face. Even Grindelwald showed a momentary start. "You know who I am?" he demanded. Cyrus's contempt hardened. "You and Voldemort are both pitiful. That body cannot hold two souls, can it, vile Hebo?" 260. Wizards are gods. Despicable Hebo. Cyrus spoke the name once, and it struck like a summons. Despicable Hebo. Grindelwald knew the name too. Wizards didn't wear nationalities the same way Muggles did, and old names traveled. Hebo was infamous enough to have been given that epithet. He'd invented terrible dark arts, the most notorious of which was the Horcrux. Few had ever seen the book at Hogwarts describing them. It was guarded and seldom read. Grindelwald had only learned of Voldemort's Horcruxes after his release from Nurmengard. "The inventor of soul-splitting, the one who created Horcruxes?" Grindelwald said, astonished. Haibo's disguise fell away like flaking paint. Beneath it was a shell of a man, flesh rotted and hanging, the corpse rejecting the foreign life it had been made to hold. He had Voldemort's body, but the soul within was still Haibo's, corrupt and decayed, accelerating the corpse's decline. If Aberforth had been here, he might have recognized that same bent, tired figure who'd long lingered in the Hog's Head, drinking, skimming the Quibbler, an old man who kept a dark sense of humor amid ruin. Haibo ignored Grindelwald's question and looked at him with scorn. "Evil? Look at you. Compared to you, I'm not evil at all." It wasn't an empty claim. Grindelwald's own form had twisted. He looked like something from a nightmare, a husk who had swallowed dementors and not the least able to digest them. Bone and black remnants seemed to grow out of his flesh, each arm like a grasping claw. In pursuit of revenge for Haibo, Grindelwald had remade himself into a monster. He didn't care. "It's you, Cyrus," Haibo said with curious eyes. "How did you know it was me? We've never met." They had come close once. Cyrus had been to the Hog's Head looking for the Vault 12 key, yet they hadn't actually met. Voldemort had met him, though. Cyrus answered coolly. "I wondered why you would choose Voldemort's corpse. So many die in this world, and you chose him. There must be a reason." Hebo listened. Cyrus continued. "At first I thought the connection might be bloodline, an ancestor." "Not impossible," Hebo allowed. "Maybe. But that's not why I chose him. Because what you need isn't a normal body. You need one that can hold a fragmented soul." "You invented the Horcrux," Cyrus said. "Voldemort thought he could live forever, but it didn't save him. Horcruxes split the soul. They don't make the body immortal. Look at you now. If Voldemort were still alive, his body would still decay under time." "You're right," Hybo said. No point in hiding it now. Cyrus's knowledge of Horcruxes, reborn from one himself, was deeper than most, perhaps deeper than Voldemort's or Dumbledore's. Hybo explained smoothly. Even with Horcruxes, a soul might linger, but the body could be destroyed. He'd used the magic of Horcruxes to spawn new vessels for himself over the years, living under many names. He glanced past them to the island sinking beneath the sea. Names fell from his lips. Habo, Excetus, the dark wizard who had founded Azkaban. So you made the Dementors. When one road closes, you take another, Habo said with a thin smile. After my father's bones sank into the earth, I realized if I didn't find another way out, my life would be spent clinging to snakes' and rats' bodies. That's not the immortality I wanted. I took those muggles for experiments, he added, for my endless life. They were worthless lives, but they should thank me. I made them immortal. Nothing can kill them. Hybo stopped, and for the first time his voice grew almost casual. Except for the two of you. Cyrus shook his head. Pathetic. Pathetic? Hybo laughed, and then shouted, and the sea behind him surged, waves churning like a storm. No, magnificent. Who can stop me? I left behind the magic of Horcruxes, my secret of immortality for this day. His voice swelled, grandiose and old. Soon I will sacrifice both of you. I will win true eternal life. Even the sands of time will not touch me. I will rule the world. His tone softened suddenly, condescending as an elder scolding a child. Playing house with muggles? Really, Cyrus, I wouldn't bother. To him, muggle lives were expendable, instruments for his experiments. Cyrus looked at Hybo as if through a glass. The two men were mirrors in more than face. Both hated muggles, both feared decay, both claimed divinity. Cyrus even wondered aloud if Hybo had really taken Voldemort's body, or if Voldemort had been resurrected with Hybo's soul. Hybo's answer was simply, I am death. Names meant little to him. He changed them frequently. Identity was trivial. The one thing he wanted to become was death itself. Cyrus and Grindelwald had come to send him there. The battle reignited and escalated. Grindelwald unleashed desperate, corrosive power. Every spell he cast carried the cries of the countless dead. The faceless things that followed him may have seemed unemotional, but before they had become Dementors, they had been full of life. And here, emotion fed magic. Grindelwald's rage and grief coalesced into an aura colder than ice. The Dementors, once resisting him, now moved as one with him, arms stretching like chains, grasping at Hybo as if to drag their creator back into the abyss. They shifted into black mist and skeletal wings, circling like a storm. Cyrus answered with a different terror. He called down the weather. He harnessed air, rain, lightning. The magic of storm and sky concentrated in his palms. The Thunderbird's power in his hands magnified into something that seemed to hold the heavens themselves. He spread his arms, lightning ripped through the darkness. Boom! Cyrus's thunder tore open the void. Rain began in sheets over the sea. Currents twisted, drawing seawater skyward in a column like a ladder to the gods. It was beyond anything ordinary wizards were said to manage. Hebo had been right. Wizards could be gods. Wizards among wizards. Gods above gods. Rumble. Far away at Hogwarts, Harry had only just returned from Godric's Hollow after the Halloween feast when a wind nearly knocked several people over. The air felt heavy, mirroring his sullen mood. For a moment he thought back to life under the Dursleys, shrinking into the cupboard under the stairs, making himself small whenever guests came, careful not to breathe too loudly for fear of hitting his head on the steps. The stormy weather made him inexplicably nostalgic for the days he wished away. It's going to rain, Ron said, poking his head into the corridor. His hair looked damp already. I wish it would. Hogwarts had been strangely dry since Dumbledore's death. The usual rains had mostly stopped. Harry longed for a proper downpour, a drenching, cleansing rain. If it rains, I'll take the firebolt and fly, he said. I've wanted to do that for ages. Count me in, Ron said. He'd gotten a nice broom, too, the Cleansweep-zess, newer on paper than Harry's firebolt, though brooms were like cars. New didn't always mean better. By midnight, the sky broke. Rain fell in thick curtains, hammering at the windows, leaving palm-sized splashes before streaming down. The wind was worse, so violent that through the glass Harry and Ron watched the humping willow strain and twist, branches whipped upward like hair on end. Ron swallowed and suggested, maybe we should forget it. Forget it, Harry agreed. deciding not to risk his neck. Any attempt to fly in that would invite Hagrid to find two broken, unidentifiable corpses in the Forbidden Forest. Already, elsewhere in the castle, a boy had opened a window and been swept out with it. The next day, Professor McGonagall found him clinging to a spire and promptly announced that all classes were suspended and nobody was to leave the castle. The greenhouses took a beating too. Professor Sprout fretted while Hagrid, towering and stubborn, protected most of the plants as best he could. Hermione sat by the fire, warming her hands. "But," she began, and then, voice low and anxious, "how is Cyrus now?"